behind the gunfights and glory of the Magnificent Seven. For a few dollars, more the good, the bad, and the ugly, NCIS. The A-Team in The Godfather lies a quieter tragedy. The faces that once defined strength, rebellion, and honor have faded with time. Where did fame lead them after the final cut? How did age and loss reshape their lives? Who still walks among us, and who has already taken a final bow, leaving only echoes on screen?
The Magnificent Seven 1960 isn't just a Western, it is the blueprint of cinematic cool. With its thunderous score and a lineup of Hollywood titans, it defined heroism for a generation of children who dreamed of being gunslingers. But when the dust settled, the invincible seven-faced enemies they couldn't outdraw. Behind the swagger lay a cursed reality of lung cancer, tragic accidents, and lonely endings. Today the village is empty. We pay tribute to the fallen legends who rode off into the sunset, leaving behind a legacy paid for in sorrow. Yul Brynner joined the film 1960 in the role of Chris Larrabee Adams, the king whose iron lungs were slowly turned to ash by his own vice. Yul Brynner was the undisputed monarch of the set, the only actor whose name appeared above the title on the original poster. At 40 years old, he was already an Oscar winner, and the driving force behind the film, having personally secured the rights to adapt Seven Samurai. As the film's powerhouse, Brynner commanded a deal that was astronomical for 1960, a salary of $250,000 plus a percentage of the box office gross. This deal meant he earned more than the other six actors combined, a financial dominance that fueled massive resentment on set. However, the man who played the bulletproof gunslinger was fighting a losing war against his own biology. Brynner was a chain smoker, consuming up to 5 packs a day, a habit that projected coolness on screen, but was rotting him from the inside out. His life ended not in a blaze of glory, but in a slow, suffocating decline. Diagnosed with inoperable lung cancer, he spent his final months recording a haunting, anti-smoking commercial warning, "The world don't do it." He died on October 10, 1985, at the age of 65. He left behind a substantial net worth of $10 million and a legacy of strength, but his final breath was a gasping plea against the very thing that had been his constant companion. Fun fact: Brynner was so paranoid about Steve McQueen stealing the scene that he built a small mound of earth to stand on during their shots together to ensure he looked taller than McQueen. Brynner tried to dominate the screen, but he was constantly looking over his shoulder at a young, hungry co-star who was willing to crash his own car just to steal the movie. Steve McQueen joined the film 1960 in the role of Vin Tanner, the king of cool who fought for scraps before becoming the highest-paid star in the world. Steve McQueen was 30 years old and hungry for stardom when he fought to play Vin Tanner. At the time, he was trapped in a TV contract for Wanted Dead or Alive. To get this role, he famously staged a fake car accident, claiming whiplash to get a medical release from his TV show. Despite his efforts, his salary for the Magnificent Seven was a humble $50, and so $9, a fraction of Brynner's pay. This disparity fueled a bitter rivalry. McQueen spent the entire shoot trying to upstage Brynner by fiddling with his hat or checking his gun in the background of Brynner's monologues. While he eventually became the highest-paid actor in the world, commanding $5 million a film in the 70s, his end was agonizing. McQueen developed mesothelioma, a rare and aggressive cancer caused by asbestos exposure from his days in the Marines and racing suits. He died on November 7, 1980, at age 50, following a desperate failed surgery in Mexico to remove massive tumors. He left behind a fortune of $30 million, but all his money couldn't buy him time against the silent killer in his lungs. Fun fact: during the filming in Mexico, the local government censors were on set daily to ensure the Mexican peasantry weren't depicted as too dirty, forcing McQueen and the cast to wear clean clothes that they had to manually dirty up with dust between takes. McQueen was the master of scene stealing, but the man standing next to him stole scenes without saying a word, using only a knife and a silence that hid a crippling physical pain. James Coburn joined the film 1960 in the role of Britt, the silent assassin whose hands were his greatest weapon until his own body turned against them. James Coburn was a relative unknown when he was cast as Britt, the knife-throwing expert. He was 32 years old and was selected largely because he was a genuine student of martial arts and Zen philosophy. His financial compensation reflected his lack of star power. He was paid a weekly rate that totaled approximately $5,000 to $10,000 for the entire shoot, literally pennies, compared to the millions the film would generate over decades. Coburn's tragedy was a cruel irony. The man famous for his dexterity and physical grace was struck down by severe rheumatoid arthritis in the 1990s. The disease was so debilitating that it left one of his hands effectively crippled, halting his career for years and causing him immense chronic pain that he hid behind his signature grin. He eventually healed enough to win an Oscar late in life, but the damage was done. He died of a sudden heart attack on November 18, 2002, at the age of 74, while listening to music with his wife. He left behind a net worth of $10 million, a fortune earned through resilience after his body tried to retire him early. Fun fact, Coburn was one of the pallbearers at Bruce Lee's funeral. The two were close friends, and Lee credited Coburn with teaching him the philosophy of slowing down to maximize power. Britt was the cool, silent type, but the next member of the seven was the Muscle, a man who grew up in such extreme poverty that he wore a dress to school, yet grew up to become an international icon. Charles Bronson joined the film 1960 in the role of Bernardo O'Reilly, the tough guy with the heart of gold whose stoic face hid the grief of a lifetime. Charles Bronson was 39 years old, playing the mercenary who bonds with the village children. Born Charles Bukinski, he grew up in grueling poverty as a coal miner in Pennsylvania. For The Magnificent Seven, he was considered a mid-tier actor and was paid approximately $50,000, the same as McQueen. It would take another decade for him to explode into global superstardom, with Death Wish eventually commanding $1 million per film plus percentage points, making him one of the richest actors of the 1970s. However, money could not protect him from loss. The love of his life, actress Jill Ireland, died of breast cancer in 1990 after a long public battle that shattered Bronson. The man who looked like he was carved from granite was never the same. He spent his final years suffering from Alzheimer's disease, slowly forgetting the career he had fought so hard to build. He died on August 30, 2003 at the age of 81. He left behind a massive estate estimated at $45 million, but he died a shadow of the tough protector he once played. Fun fact: he was so poor as a child that he famously had to wear his sister's dress to school because he had no other clothes, a humiliation that fueled his lifelong desire for financial security. Bronson became a legend, but the next man on the team holds the tragic title of being the only member of the seven who never achieved superstardom, destined to be the answer to a trivia question. Brad Dexter joined the film 1960 in the role of Harry Luck, the forgotten member of the seven who spent his life chasing a fortune that never came. Brad Dexter played Harry Luck at 43, the mercenary who joins the group purely for the promise of gold. It was a role that mirrored his real life in Hollywood, always chasing the big break that remained just out of reach. While his co-stars skyrocketed to fame, Dexter remained a supporting player. His salary for the film was the lowest of the main cast, estimated at roughly $5,000, similar to Coburn's, but without the future career explosion. Dexter's life was defined not by his acting, but by a single moment in 1964 when he saved Frank Sinatra from drowning in Hawaii. For years, he became Sinatra's unofficial bodyguard and shadow sacrificing his own acting ambitions to serve the singer. He eventually realized he was losing his own identity and severed ties, but his career never recovered. He died on December 12, 2002 at the age of 85, just weeks after James Coburn. He left behind a modest estate, forever known as the other guy, in the most famous lineup in Western history. Fun fact: he was the first of the seven to die in the movie, but in a strange twist of fate, he was one of the last survivors in real life, outliving McQueen and Brenner by decades. Brad Dexter was the forgotten American, but the next member of the seven was a German heartthrob who was cast to appeal to the European market, yet spent his life trying to escape his own James Dean reputation. Horst Buchholz joined the film 1960 in the role of Chico, the German James Dean, whose explosive rise to fame masked a lifetime of silent identity struggles. Horst Buchholz was just 27 years old when he was handpicked to play Chico, the hot-headed young gunman who yearns to prove himself. Billed as the European James Dean, the studio expected him to become the next global superstar. His salary reflected this gamble. While not earning Brenner's millions, Buchholz commanded a fee estimated at $35,000 to $40,000, a significant sum for a foreign import, and notably higher than future legends like Steve McQueen or Charles Bronson, which caused immense friction on set. However, his life was a constant battle between his public image and private reality. While he played the machismo-fueled romantic lead, Buchholz privately struggled with his bisexuality in an era that would have destroyed his career had it been known. He lived under the suffocating weight of hiding his true self to maintain his heartthrob contract. His later years were marred by a horrific car accident that crushed his legs, leaving him in chronic pain that shadowed his performances. He passed away on March 3, 2003 at the age of 69 from pneumonia following a hip fracture operation. He left behind a net worth of roughly $5 million, but he died with the melancholy legacy of a star who burned bright early on but slowly faded as the secrets of his life took their toll on his spirit. Fun fact: despite playing a Mexican peasant revolutionary, Buchholz was thoroughly German and had to learn his Spanish accent phonetically, often being coached by the local Mexican crew who found his attempt hilarious. Sotero survived the battle, but eventually time claims us all. We end our journey with the man who played the coward, but in real life had to be the bravest of them all because he was the last one left. Robert Vaughn joined the film 1960 in the role of Lee, the glamorous coward who became the last living memory of a golden age, dying with the heavy burden of being the final survivor. Robert Vaughn was 28 years old, fresh off an Oscar nomination, when he was cast as Lee the gunman terrified of death. His salary was a respectable $15,000, though it paled in comparison to McQueen or Brenner. Vaughn was the intellectual of the group, holding a PhD, and he watched with a detached irony as his co-stars engaged in ego wars. His tragedy was unique. He didn't die young, but he had to watch everyone else die. One by one, he attended the funerals of Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, James Coburn, and Charles Bronson. He became the last of the seven, the sole keeper of the film's secrets. He continued to work tirelessly, from the man from UNCLE to hustle, never retiring. However, biology finally caught the last gunman. He battled acute leukemia in secret for a year, passing away on November 11, 2016, at the age of 83. He left behind a substantial net worth of $10 million and a loving family. With his death, the Magnificent Seven were finally reunited, leaving the village empty and the screen fading to black. Fun fact: the gloves he wears in the film weren't just a costume choice for a fancy gunman. Vaughn actually wore them because he was allergic to horses, and the dusty rains caused his hands to break out in hives. Chico fought to save the village, but the man threatening it was played by a Jewish method actor from New York who stole the movie from the heroes yet lived long enough to see them all perish. Eli Wallach joined the film 1960 in the role of Calvera at 45. The Bandit King, whose gleaming gold tooth hid the grit of a method actor, paid a fraction of his worth. Eli Wallach was already a respected stage veteran when he donned the sombrero to play Calvera. He took the role primarily for the money, hoping to fund a stage play, yet his compensation was surprisingly modest compared to the seven. Wallach was reportedly paid a flat fee of approximately $20,000 to $25,000 for his weeks of work. While Yul Brynner was earning percentage points that would make him a millionaire, Wallach received no back-end royalties for creating one of cinema's most iconic villains. His tragedy was not one of early death, but of physical decline in the public eye. In his later years, Wallach suffered a stroke that rendered him blind in his left eye, disability he hid from producers to keep working. He continued to act well into his 90s, often as the last living link to a golden age that had long since turned to dust. He defied the curse of the cast outliving every single member of the Magnificent Seven. He died on June 24, 2014, at the incredible age of 98 from natural causes. He left behind a net worth of $6 million and a legacy of stealing scenes from men who were paid 10 times his salary. Fun fact: Wallach had absolutely no idea how to ride a horse before taking the role. The first time he got on one for the film, the horse bolted, and the terrified look on Calvera's face in the wide shots is actually Wallach's genuine fear for his life. Calvera terrorized the village, but the heart of that village was a woman who represented the innocence they were fighting for, played by a Mexican actress who faced the harsh reality of Hollywood's wage gap. Rosenda Monteros joined the film 1960 in the role of Petra, the beauty of the village whose talent was overshadowed by the industry's refusal to see her as more than a prop. Rosenda Monteros was 25 years old when she was cast as Petra, the villager who captures Chico's heart. In her native Mexico, she was a rising star of serious drama, but to the Hollywood producers, she was a local hire. The financial disparity was staggering and exploitative. While the American extras and supporting players were protected by union minimums, Monteros was likely paid a non-union local rate, estimated at less than $2,000 for the entire production. She stood toe-to-toe with international superstars, carrying the emotional weight of the film's romantic subplot, yet she was compensated with pennies compared to the dollars thrown at her male co-stars. Her tragedy was the glass ceiling of ethnicity. Despite her undeniable talent and screen presence, Hollywood offered her few roles beyond exotic villager, stifling a career that could have rivaled the greats. She spent her life dedicated to the theater in Mexico, far from the glitz of LA. She passed away on December 29, 2018, at the age of 83. She left behind a modest estate rich in cultural respect, but devoid of the Hollywood fortune that her contribution to the film deserved. Fun fact: her chemistry with Horst Buchholz was so convincing that rumors of a real-life romance swirled for years, though she always maintained they were just professionals, bridging a massive cultural divide. Petra represented the future of the village, but the past was held by the village elder, played by a man whose real life was a desperate flight from tyranny that made the movie's plot look tame. Vladimir Sokolov joined the film 1960 in the role of the old man, the sage of the village whose career of playing 1,000 faces ended just as the film became a legend. Vladimir Sokolov played the village elder who convinces the farmers to buy guns instead of food. By 1960, Sokolov was 71 years old and had lived a life of terrifying upheaval. He had fled Russia during the Revolution, then fled Nazi Germany, and finally fled occupied France to reach America. He was the ultimate survivor. For the Magnificent Seven, he was paid a standard character actor's weekly rate, roughly $500 per week, a humble wage for a man who brought such gravitas. His tragedy was that he never got to enjoy the film's status as a classic. His health was rapidly failing during the shoot, a lifetime of stress and displacement catching up to him. He suffered a massive stroke and died on February 15, 1962, just 2 years after the film's release. He was 72. He died with a net worth estimated at under $200,000, a working actor to the very end who spent his life wearing the masks of other cultures to survive, never able to return to the home he lost. Fun fact: despite playing the wise Mexican elder, Sokolov was actually born in Moscow. He played 35 different nationalities in his career, but famously claimed he rarely got to play a Russian. The old man gave the villagers wisdom, but the man who led the farmers was a Mexican cinema giant who stood in the background of American shots, hiding a talent that rivaled the leads. Jorge Martinez de Hoyos joined the film 1960 in the role of Hilario at 40, the soul of the resistance whose lungs claimed him in a tragic echo of his American co-stars. Jorge Martinez de Hoyos played Hilario, the brave farmer who first seeks out the gunfighters. In Mexico, de Hoyos was a heavyweight, a leading man of immense respect. However, in The Magnificent Seven, he was relegated to a supporting role with a salary to match. While Steve McQueen fought for $50,000, de Hoyos was likely paid a flat fee of $3,000 to $5,000, a stark reminder of the economic imperialism of 1960s filmmaking. He carried the dignity of the Mexican people on his shoulders, refusing to play the character as a helpless victim. His personal tragedy mirrors that of Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen in a chilling way. He too fell victim to the era's heavy smoking culture. He developed lung cancer later in life, a cruel disease that silenced his booming authoritative voice. He died on May 6, 1997 at the age of 76. He left behind a legacy as one of Mexico's finest actors, but a net worth of under $1 million, a fraction of the wealth generated by the film that used his country as a backdrop. Fun fact: he was so respected that he later refused several Hollywood roles that depicted Mexicans as lazy or stupid, knowingly turning down American paychecks to preserve his integrity. Hilario was one of the villagers on screen, but standing next to him in the crowd was another villager who would put down the prop farming tool, pick up a camera, and become one of the greatest visual artists in cinema history. John A. Alonzo joined the film 1960 in the role of Miguel at 26. The humble villager who put down the prop farming tool to become one of the greatest visionaries in cinema history. John A. Alonzo appears in the film as Miguel, a peasant villager with only a few lines standing in the dusty background of the stars. At the time, he was a struggling Mexican-American actor, trying to break into an industry that only saw him as a stereotype. His pay for this acting role was a standard Screen Actors Guild day rate, accumulating to perhaps $1 to $500 for the shoot-a wage that barely covered his living expenses in Los Angeles. However, the true story of Alonzo is one of the most remarkable pivots in Hollywood history. Realizing that actors of color were destined for poverty in the 1960s, he switched to behind the camera. He became a legendary cinematographer, crafting the visual look of masterpieces like Chinatown in Scarface. While he went from earning pennies as an extra to commanding $51,000 to $20,000 per week as a top-tier director of photography in the 80s, his end was tragically premature. After spending a lifetime framing the perfect shot, his own picture faded to black too soon. He died on March 13, 2001, at the age of 66 after a battle with lung cancer. He left behind a net worth of $2 million and a visual legacy that defined American film noir, proving that the man in the background was the one with the clearest vision all along. Fun fact: he was the first American cinematographer to use handheld camera work in a major studio film, revolutionizing the gritty, realistic look of 1970s cinema. Alonzo was a villager, but the conflict of the movie began with a railroad bully played by a man whose menacing face made him the most hated villain in the West, even though he was a gentleman in real life. Robert J. Wilk joined the film 1960 in the role of Wallace at 46, the face of pure evil whose career as a professional bully hid a gentle soul in a golfer's heart. Robert J. Wilk played Wallace, the racist railroad heavy who initiates the conflict in the opening scene. With his sneering face and cold eyes, Wilkie was typecast for 40 years as the man you love to hate. Despite appearing in classics like High Noon, he was a working heavy, meaning he never received the star treatment. His salary for The Magnificent Seven was a flat weekly fee estimated at $750 to $1,000 per week. He appeared in over 200 films, yet he was always the obstacle, never the hero, and his paychecks reflected that he worked for volume, not millions. While he terrified audiences on screen, his off-screen life was shockingly normal. He was a professional-level golfer who earned extra money on the PGA Tour circuit because acting didn't pay enough to support his lifestyle. His tragedy was the curse of the heavy. He was so good at being bad that the industry never let him show his range. He died on March 28, 1989, at the age of 74 from cancer. He left behind a modest estate of $500,000, mostly earned on the golf course, rather than the movie set, dying as one of the most recognizable faces in Westerns who never got to ride off into the sunset as the good guy. Fun fact: he was such a good golfer that he is one of the few actors to have a winning record against professional golfers in celebrity pro-am tournaments. Wallace wasn't alone in his bullying. He was accompanied by a traveling salesman played by a character actor whose intense face graced 1,000 screens, yet died waiting for his big break. Val Avery joined the film 1960 in the role of Henry, the corset salesman with the face of a thug who spent 50 years selling his talent for scale pay. Val Avery played Henry at 36, the corset salesman and companion to the bully Wallace. Avery had a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite, which meant he played tough guys, mobsters, and grifters for 5 decades. For his brief role in The Magnificent Seven, he was paid the standard day player rate of the 1960s, roughly $300 to $400. It was a pittance for a man who would go on to work with director John Cassavetes and appear in The Twilight Zone. Avery was the definition of the blue-collar actor. He took every job offered from Columbo to low-budget exploitation films just to keep his health insurance. He never achieved fame, wealth, or glory. He was a craftsman who showed up, delivered his lines with menacing perfection, and went home to a quiet life. He died on December 12, 2009, at the impressive age of 85, passing away peacefully at his home. He left behind a net worth of under $1 million accumulated slowly over thousands of days on set. His obituary didn't make the front page, but his face is woven into the DNA of 20th century television, a testament to the endurance of the working man. Fun fact: despite playing tough guys and criminals, he was a gentle intellectual in real life who loved poetry and was a devoted family man, married to the same woman for 56 years. The salesman was selling corsets, but the man they were harassing was the local undertaker, played by an actor so ubiquitous that he became the face of authority for 3 generations. Whit Bissell joined the film 1960 in the role of Cham Lee, the undertaker who refused to drive the hearse, played by Hollywood's most reliable That Guy. Whit Bissell played Cham Lee at 51, the prejudiced undertaker who refuses to bury a Native American. Bissell was the ultimate That Guy actor. You saw him as the doctor, the scientist, or the general in hundreds of movies, including I Was a Teenage Werewolf. His ubiquity, however, did not translate to wealth. For The Magnificent Seven, he was a supporting player, paid a weekly rate of approximately $500 to $700. He was a volume actor, racking up over 300 credits, but never receiving a profit participation deal in his life. He was the machinery of Hollywood, essential but interchangeable. His personal decline was a slow, cruel stripping away of the dignity he portrayed on screen. In his later years, he suffered from Parkinson's disease, which robbed him of his ability to work and his signature, precise diction. He died on March 5, 1996, at the age of 86. He left behind an estate estimated at $1.5 million, the nest egg built on frugality, and decades of saying yes to every script that needed a man in a lab coat or a suit. Fun fact: he holds a unique sci-fi record. He played a scientist in The Time Machine 1960 and a general in the Time Tunnel TV series, making him the face of time travel authority in the 60s. The Undertaker was afraid of the mob, but the man leading the mob at Boot Hill was a gun-toting bigot, played by an actor who would struggle for 30 years before hitting the jackpot, only to die the moment he got rich. Jim Davis joined the film 1960 in the role of gunman at Boot Hill at 5101. The B-movie struggler who finally struck oil as Jock Ewing, only to have cancer steal his victory lap. Jim Davis played the loudmouth gunman who tries to stop the funeral procession. For decades, Davis was stuck in B-movie hell, playing villains and sheriffs in low-budget westerns for mediocre pay, roughly $1,000 per week, when he could get work. He was a journeyman who watched his peers become millionaires while he scraped by. Then in 1978, at the age of 69, he was cast as the patriarch Jock Ewing in the global phenomenon Dallas. Suddenly he was famous and earning $25,000+ per episode, but the universe played a cruel joke. Just as he achieved the fame and fortune he had chased for 40 years, he was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a cancer of the bone marrow. He continued to film Dallas while dying, wearing a hairpiece to hide chemotherapy hair loss, and sitting in chairs because he was too weak to stand. He died on April 26, 1981, at the age of 71, right in the middle of his massive success. He left behind a net worth of $3 million money that came too late to save him or to be enjoyed. Fun fact: in his final episodes of Dallas, the writers had to write scenes where Jock Ewing was seated at a desk or in a car because Davis literally lacked the physical strength to hold himself upright for a wide shot. Jim Davis was a famous TV dad, but the man standing next to him in the opening scene was the real-life father of a Hollywood superstar and a man who lived a double life as a baseball mogul. Bing Russell joined the film 1960 in the role of Robert, the traveling companion whose legacy isn't his acting, but the superstar son he raised. Bing Russell played Robert at 34, the companion to the salesman in the opening sequence. A recognizable character actor, best known as the deputy on Bonanza Russell, was a working-class actor who earned the standard union minimums, roughly $350 to $500 per week, for a film like this. He never achieved leading man status or the massive paychecks of the era. However, his greatest production wasn't a movie, it was his son, Kurt Russell. While Bing toiled in supporting roles, he mentored Kurt into becoming an international icon worth millions. Bing's true passion, however, was baseball. He famously created the independent team, the Portland Mavericks, proving he was a maverick in life as well as on screen. His end came quietly, far from the roar of the stadium or the set. He died on April 8, 2003, at the age of 76 from cancer. He left behind a modest acting estate of under $1 million, but a genetic dynasty that rules Hollywood to this day. Fun fact: he is the only actor in history to be killed by the principal character in the pilot episode of 4 different massive TV westerns: Gunsmoke, The Rifleman Bonanza, and The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp. We leave the Americans behind and head into the mountains to meet the bandits, including Calvera's second-in-command, played by an actor who had to fight stereotypes his entire career just to get a death scene. Valentin de Vargas joined the film 1960 in the role of Santos, the loyal lieutenant whose menacing screen presence trapped him in a lifetime of villainy. Valentin de Vargas played Santos, at 25, Calvera's right-hand man, who enforces the bandits' will with a silent, terrifying glare. De Vargas was a talented Mexican-American actor, but in the racially stratified Hollywood of the 1960s, he was pigeonholed as the heavy. His compensation for The Magnificent Seven was that of a featured supporting player earning a weekly rate of approximately $750 to $1,000. While his face was plastered on posters and he stood next to Eli Wallach in nearly every scene, his bank account never reflected his importance to the film's tension. He spent his career playing drug dealers, thugs, and henchmen, rarely given the chance to play the hero, which severely capped his earning potential compared to his white counterparts. His tragedy was a slow, painful exit caused by myelodysplastic syndrome, a rare blood cancer. He passed away on June 10, 2013, at the age of 78. He died with a net worth estimated at $1.5 million, a respectable sum, but one earned through decades of being the bad guy who gets killed so the hero can look good. Fun fact: in a rare break from typecasting, he actually played a sympathetic character in Orson Welles' classic Touch of Evil, proving he had the range of a leading man if Hollywood had only allowed it. Santos relied on violence, but the man standing next to him was the one who actually took the hits, a stuntman and actor whose body paid the price for the film's action. Larry Duran joined the film 1960 in the role of henchman Mars Stuntman, the human punching bag who broke his bones for a paycheck that barely covered the medical bills. At 35, Larry Duran is credited as a henchman, but his real job was survival. As one of the film's primary stunt performers and a close friend of Marlon Brando in other films, Duran was the man who fell off horses, took punches, and absorbed the explosions. In 1960, hazard pay was minimal. Duran likely earned a base rate of $350 per week with small bumps bonuses of $50 to $100 for particularly dangerous stunts. While Steve McQueen looked cool shooting a gun, Duran was the one hitting the dirt. The disparity is visceral. The stars got the glory and the millions, while Duran got the bruises and a working-class wage. His tragedy was the cumulative toll of a life spent as a professional victim of violence. He died on December 31st in 2002 at the age of 77. There were no headlines despite his presence in classics like One-Eyed Jacks and The Wild Bunch. He left behind a negligible estate, his legacy written in the action sequences, where his face is blurred, but his physical sacrifice makes the movie iconic. Fun fact: he was often used as a utility stuntman, meaning he would die in one scene, change his shirt and hat, and die again in the next scene as a completely different bandit. The bandits were the enemy, but the seven were betrayed by a man inside the town, played by an actor with icy eyes who became a Union legend, fighting for the rights of actors like Duran. Joseph Ruskin joined the film 1960 in the role of Flynn, the traitor with the piercing eyes whose face you know, but whose name you likely forgot. Joseph Ruskin played Flynn at 36, the shady character who gives information to the seven only to turn on them. With his bald head and intense icy stare, Ruskin was the ultimate character actor. For his role in The Magnificent Seven, he was paid the standard day player rate, accumulating perhaps $100 or $500 for his time on set. Unlike the flashier stars, Ruskin was a blue-collar actor who understood the precarious nature of the business. He didn't chase fame, he chased fairness. He served on the board of the Screen Actors Guild for decades, fighting to get better wages and health insurance for the middle class of Hollywood. His personal life was devoid of scandal, but marked by the inevitable march of time. He worked until the very end, passing away on December the 28th, 2013, at the age of 89 from natural causes. He left behind an estate estimated at $2 million, not from a single blockbuster, but from the pension and residuals he helped secure for himself and thousands of others. Fun fact: he holds a rare sci-fi record. He appeared in 4 different Star Trek series, the original series, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise, playing a different alien in each one. Ruskin was a recognizable face, but the man working the front desk in the movie was an uncredited extra who would go on to become one of the most beloved TV stars of the 1980s, only to die tragically young. Victor French joined the film 1960 in the role of front office clerk at 26. The uncredited extra who rose to become a TV legend, only to be struck down at the peak of his success. Victor French appears for mere seconds as the clerk in the opening, scenes a role so small he wasn't even credited. In 1960, he was earning the extra's rate of $25 per day. It is a shocking contrast to his future. He would eventually become the best friend and co-star of Michael Landon in Little House on the Prairie and Highway to Heaven, earning $25,000 per episode and becoming a household name. However, his story is one of the most heartbreaking in television history. A heavy smoker and drinker, French lived life hard. Just as Highway to Heaven ended and he was preparing for a new phase of his career, he was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer. He died on June 15, 1989, only 3 months after his diagnosis. He was 54 years old. He left behind a net worth of $3 million, but he never got to enjoy his retirement. The man who spent 30 years climbing from uncredited extra to TV star had his victory lap stolen by his own vices. Fun fact: he was the only actor to direct, star in, and write for Little House on the Prairie and Highway to Heaven, proving he was a creative force, not just a sidekick. Victor French died young, but the villager fighting alongside the Seven was played by a man who defied the odds, surviving the brutal industry to become one of the oldest living cast members. Rico Alanas joined the film 1960 in the role of Sotero, the survivor whose career spanned 60 years of playing the other, outliving almost everyone. Rico Alanas played Sotero at 41, one of the few villagers who steps up to fight. Mexican-born Alanas spent his career fighting for visibility in a system that wanted to erase him. For The Magnificent Seven, he was paid a weekly supporting rate of roughly $500 to $700. He watched as white actors like Charles Bronson and Horst Buchholz were paid 10 times his salary to play characters of his own ethnicity. Despite this systemic unfairness, Alanas persisted. He didn't succumb to the drugs or reckless behavior that claimed his co-stars. He lived a quiet, dignified life, acting well into his 80s. He passed away on March 9, 2015, at the incredible age of 95. He died of natural causes, leaving behind a modest estate of under $1 million. He was the quiet survivor, the man who outlived the gunslingers, proving that sometimes the greatest victory isn't getting the biggest paycheck, but simply surviving the game. Fun fact: despite being born in Mexico, he was frequently cast as Native American characters in Westerns, a common Hollywood practice of interchangeable ethnicities that he privately resented but accepted to feed his family. It's bittersweet looking back at the cast of The Magnificent Seven. Though time has passed and some stars have left us, their legacy remains timeless on screen. Which story shocked or touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to help us keep these memories alive. Thanks for watching.
It is the greatest showdown in movie history. The good, the bad, and the ugly. 1966 isn't just a film, it's a cinematic religion that defined cool for half a century. But while Tuco and Blondie searched for a grave full of gold, the actors who played them found early graves full of sorrow. Behind the iconic ponchos and the Ennio Morricone score lies a grim history of drug addiction, horrifying suicides, and agonizing illnesses that decimated the cast. Join us as we walk through the cemetery of Sad Hill one last time to pay tribute to the legends who have ridden off into the eternal sunset, leaving only their shadows behind. Lee Van Cleef joined the film 1968 as Sentenza Angel Eyes, the demonic mercenary whose piercing gaze hid a body ravaged by pain and a heart failing under the weight of his own legend. Lee Van Cleef was 41 years old when he solidified his status as cinema's greatest villain, the Bad. While Clint Eastwood demanded a percentage of the profits, Van Cleef was paid a flat salary estimated at $50,000 to $70,000 for the role, a significant raise from his previous film, but a fraction of the $25 million movie grossed in the US alone. He never saw a dime of back-end royalties, meaning the studio profited from his likeness for decades while he worked until the end. His stoic, narrowing eyes were not just acting, they were a mask for chronic agony. A shattered knee from a 1958 car crash and a missing fingertip left him in constant pain, which he self-medicated with alcohol and painkillers, leading to severe heart disease. He spent his final years with a pacemaker, struggling to breathe, a bad man who was actually a fragile, suffering soul. He died of a massive heart attack on December 16th in 1989 at the age of 64. He left behind a net worth of approximately $2 million, a fortune earned in blood and pain during his later years, proving that while he played the villain, he was the hero of his own survival story. Fun fact: he was missing the tip of his middle finger on his right hand, a disfigurement he usually hid with clever camera angles. But if you look closely during the gun assembly scenes, you can spot the deformity. Angel Eyes was a solitary predator, but he relied on a gang of henchmen, the most loyal of whom was played by a man who risked his life for the film without ever showing his face on a poster. Benito Stefanelli joined the film 1966 as a member of Angel Eyes' gang, the invisible architect of the film's violence who broke his body for a paycheck that barely covered the medical bills. Benito Stefanelli was 38 years old and served a dual role. He was a henchman on screen and the uncredited stunt coordinator off-screen. Despite holding two critical jobs that defined the film's action, his pay was a meager flat fee estimated at $3,000 to $5,000 total. He choreographed the brutal beatings and dangerous falls, taking the physical punishment that the stars refused. In the 1960s, stunt safety was non-existent. Stefanelli threw himself off horses and roofs onto hard ground, accumulating injuries that plagued him with crippling arthritis in his later years. He was the man behind the man, fluent in English and serving as the bridge between Leone and Eastwood, yet he died without the fame or the fortune of the men he protected. He passed away on December 18, 1999 at the age of 71. He died quietly, leaving behind a net worth of under $500,000, a humble sum for the man who essentially invented the physical language of the spaghetti western genre. Fun fact: he appeared in countless films as a stuntman, but he rarely spoke on camera. In this film, his silent, looming presence was used to enhance the menace of Angel Eyes without needing dialogue. Stefanelli managed the stunts, but the gang needed physical intimidation provided by a towering actor whose life ended in a sudden violent crash on a lonely road. Romano Pupo joined the film 1966 as a member of Angel Eyes' gang, the towering giant whose imposing stature led to a career of typecasting and a shocking violent death. Romano Pupo was 33 years old when he played one of Angel Eyes' most recognizable thugs. Standing at a massive 6'6", he was hired solely for his size to make Lee Van Cleef look like a leader of monsters. His compensation was the standard day player rate for Italian stunt actors, earning roughly $500 for the production. Pupo spent his entire career playing nameless henchmen who were beaten or shot by the hero, never allowed to display his range or personality. He was a blue-collar worker of the cinema, moving from set to feed his family. His tragedy was not a slow decline, but a brutal, instantaneous end. On May 11, 1994, while riding his scooter in Trieste, Italy, He suffered a fatal heart attack or seizure that caused him to crash violently. He was 61 years old. He died on the asphalt, leaving behind a negligible estate and a filmography of over 100 films where he was always the villain, never the victor. Fun fact: due to his incredible height and build, he was often used as a body double for Lee Van Cleef in long-distance shots, meaning many times you think you see the bad, you are actually seeing Pupo. The gang was full of giants, but the man sent to do the dirty work of killing the hero was a Spanish actor whose face was known to millions, but whose name was known to none. Lorenzo Robledo joined the film 1966 as Clem, the loyal enforcer who pulled the trigger for his boss only to be forgotten by the industry he served for decades. Lorenzo Robledo was 48 years old when he played Clem the henchman sent to assassinate Tuco. Robledo was a fixture of the spaghetti western, appearing in virtually every major film of the genre filmed in Spain. Despite his ubiquity, he was treated as disposable labor. His pay for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was a weekly rate of approximately $200, totaling perhaps $1,000 for his contribution to a masterpiece. While the film sells millions of copies on Blu-ray today, Robledo received zero residuals, living a modest middle-class life in Madrid. He was the ultimate face without a name, a man who contributed to the atmosphere of the West, but reaped none of the glory. He died on September 28, 2006 at the age of 88 from heart complications. He passed away in obscurity, leaving behind a modest estate of roughly $300,000, the savings of a man who spent his life dying on dusty sets for our entertainment. Fun fact: he holds the rare distinction of being killed by all three main characters, Clint Eastwood, Lee Van Cleef, and Eli Wallach, across different films in the trilogy, making him the professional victim of the series. Clem was a killer, but his first target in the movie was a helpless man eating soup, a victim played by a respected actor whose tragic decline mirrored the death of the Western genre itself. Antonio Casas joined the film 1966 as Stevens, the doomed father whose brutal interrogation scene set the dark tone for the entire masterpiece. Antonio Casas was 55 years old when he played Stevens, the man Angel Eyes visits in the film's terrifying opening. A former professional footballer turned actor, Casas was a respected name in Spanish cinema, yet his pay was a fraction of his American counterparts. He likely earned a flat fee of $2,500 for his brief but pivotal role. Casas brought a gravitas to the role that most extras lacked, selling the fear of inevitable death. However, as the Western genre faded in the late 70s, so did his career. He struggled to find work that matched his dignity, often relegated to low-budget horror films to pay the bills. He died on February 14, 1982, at the relatively young age of 70 from liver failure. He left behind a legacy of professionalism, but a modest net worth of under $500,000, a man who gave the film its emotional stakes, but didn't live long enough to see it become a global cult classic. Fun fact: before becoming an actor, he was a star athlete playing for Atletico Madrid, but an injury forced him to trade the football pitch for the soundstage, changing his destiny forever. Stevens died protecting a secret, leaving behind a grieving widow, played by a woman who was once the most exotic dancer in the world, yet found herself the only female face in a landscape of ruthless men. Chelo Alonso joined the film 1966 as Stevens' wife, the Cuban bombshell who silenced a room of killers with a single look, only to trade her stardom for a quiet life that ended in shadows. Chelo Alonso was 33 years old when she appeared as the only significant female presence in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Known as the Italian H-bomb for her role in Peplum sword and sandal films, she was a major European sex symbol. However, her appearance in this film was a cameo, earning her a flat fee estimated at $3,000 to $5,000, a surprisingly low figure for a woman whose face sold millions of tickets in the early 60s. The contrast between her on-screen magnetism and her financial compensation was stark. She was used as visual decoration in a male-dominated landscape. Shortly after this film, she abandoned her acting career to marry a producer and raise a family, disappearing from the public eye. Her personal tragedy was the slow erosion of her identity. The world moved on, and the woman who once ignited screens was forgotten. She spent her final years battling Parkinson's disease, a cruel affliction for a woman known for her physicality and dance. She passed away on February 20th, 2019 in Italy at the age of 85. She left behind a modest estate, dying as a grandmother rather than the icon she once was. Fun fact: she was a former dancer at the Folies Bergère in Paris, and her lack of dialogue in the film was intentional, as Leone believed her physical presence was more powerful than any line he could write. The beauty of Stevens's wife was a fleeting moment of grace, but the film quickly descended back into brutality, personified by a corporal played by a man who didn't need to act to be terrifying. Mario Brega joined the film 1966 as CPL Wallace, the sadistic prison guard whose brutal beating of Tuco remains one of the most painful scenes in cinema history. Mario Brega was 43 years old when he played the role of the thuggish Corporal Wallace. A former butcher from Rome, Brega brought a heaviness to the screen that was terrifyingly real. Despite his recurring roles in all $3 films, he was paid a working-class wage, earning approximately $1,500 to $2,000 for his work on this production. He was not a star. He was a tool used by Leone to inflict violence. While the film made millions, Brega lived a life of excess that mirrored his large physique. His gluttony and heavy smoking were legendary, but they masked a deep-seated insecurity and health anxiety. His tragedy was his own body. He literally ate himself to death. He suffered for years with severe diabetes and heart disease, finally succumbing to a massive heart attack on July 23, 1994, at the age of 71. He collapsed in his apartment in Rome, leaving behind a net worth of roughly $500,000, a humble sum for a man whose fists are immortalized on celluloid. Fun fact: the scene where he beats Eli Wallach was so intense that Brega actually got carried away and bruised the actor for real, forcing Wallach to scream in genuine pain, which made it into the final cut. Corporal Wallace inflicted physical pain on Tuco, but the next character inflicted a much deeper emotional wound, a brother played by an actor whose real-life darkness led to the most tragic end of the entire cast. Luigi Pistilli joined the film 1966 as Father Pablo Ramirez, the holy man whose rejection of his brother Tuco hid the actor's own losing battle with demons far worse than sin. Luigi Pistilli was 37 years old when he played the monk, bringing a Shakespearean gravity to the Western genre. A highly modified stage actor, his salary was respectable for a supporting role, estimated at $5,000. However, beneath the pious robes of Father Ramirez was a man disintegrating from the inside. Pistilli suffered from severe clinical depression, a condition he hid from the cameras for decades. The tragedy of his life is one of the most devastating in Italian cinema history. In 1996, after a theater performance of Terence Rattigan's The Deep Blue Sea was critically panned and canceled, Pistilli snapped. Unable to cope with the perceived failure and his chronic mental anguish, he hanged himself in his Milan apartment on April 21, 1996, at the age of 66. He left behind a suicide note apologizing for his inadequacy. He died with a net worth of roughly $1 million, but completely bankrupt of hope, a stark reminder that even the strongest performers can be broken by their own minds. Fun fact: he was considered one of Italy's finest interpreters of Bertolt Brecht's plays, proving that his talent went far beyond the dusty saloons of the spaghetti westerns he is best known for internationally. Father Ramirez lived in the quiet of the monastery, but the war outside was raging, led by a drunken captain played by a comedic genius whose voice was silenced before his death. Aldo Giuffre joined the film 1966 as the alcoholic Union captain, the disillusioned soldier whose dream of destroying a bridge became a metaphor for the futility of war. Aldo Giuffre was 42 years old when he delivered one of the film's most poignant performances. A famous Neapolitan comedian and voice actor, Giuffre was hired to bring a tragic humanity to the role. His pay was in the upper tier, for supporting talent likely earning $6,000 to $8,000. He played a man drinking to numb the pain of slaughter, a role that required deep emotional resonance. In real life, Giuffre was a man of voice. He was the Italian dubber for stars like Kojak. His personal tragedy struck later in life when he underwent a throat operation that severely damaged his vocal cords, stealing the very instrument that made him famous. The frustration of a voice actor losing his voice is a cruel irony. He died on June 26, 2010 at the age of 86 from peritonitis. He left behind a substantial body of work and an estate estimated at $2 million, but he spent his final years in a silence that was far more painful than the noise of the battlefield. Fun fact: before becoming an actor, he worked as a radio announcer during World War II, announcing real battles, much like the fictional ones he would later command on screen. The drunken captain died with a smile as the bridge blew up, but in the prison camp nearby, another captain ruled with dignity, played by a Spanish actor who was always the villain, except for this one shining moment. Antonio Molino Rojo joined the film 1966 as Captain Sir Harper, the noble commandant with the gangrenous leg, whose decency stood in stark contrast to the cruelty of the camp. Antonio Molino Rojo was 40 years old when he played Captain Harper, the only character in the film who treats the prisoners with respect. A staple of the Almeria film industry, Molino Rojo appeared in almost every Western of the era. Despite his ubiquity, he was paid a standard day player wage, accumulating roughly $2,000 for the shoot. His career was a study in typecasting. Because of his tall, imposing frame, he was almost always cast as a sadistic henchman or a silent killer. This role was his rare chance to play a good man, and he delivered a performance of quiet suffering. His real life was devoid of the spotlight. He was a working actor who clocked in and clocked out. He died on November 2, 2011 in Barcelona at the age of 85. He passed away from natural causes, leaving behind a modest estate of under $500,000 and a legacy of over 90 films where he was the backbone of the production, even if the audience never learned his name. Fun fact: he was often credited under anglicized names like Anthony Redmill in international releases to make the cast list seem more American, erasing his Spanish identity for marketing purposes. The sergeant presided over the dying, but out in the desert, a bounty hunter roamed, played by a man whose body was broken more times than any stuntman in history. Frank Brania joined the film 1966 as Bounty Hunter Number 2, the rugged survivor who treated broken bones as a business expense in a career defined by pain. Frank Brania was 32 years old when he appeared as one of the bounty hunters tracking the protagonists. A former shepherd and miner, Brania was built of granite and became the go-to tough guy for European westerns. His compensation was a weekly fee of roughly $200 a pittance, considering the physical toll the job exacted. Brania didn't just act, he threw his body onto rocks, fell off horses, and took punches that were often all too real. Over a career spanning 170 films, he suffered countless concussions and fractures, essentially selling his physical health for a paycheck. While the stars had trailers and stunt doubles, Brania had grit and a bottle of aspirin. His final years were marked by the chronic agony of a life spent as a human crash test dummy. He died on February 13, 2012 in Madrid at the age of 77. He left behind a legacy of resilience, but a net worth of under $400,000, proving that in the Wild West of filmmaking, the men who took the hardest hits often walked away with the lightest pockets. Fun fact: he kept a morbid diary detailing every time he died on screen, and by the end of his career, he had recorded over 160 cinematic deaths, likely a world record for on-screen fatalities. Brania was a hunter who took the hits, but riding alongside him was another gunman played by a Spanish veteran who faded into the dust of cinema history. Saturno Chera joined the film 1966 as a bounty hunter, the silent killer whose gun was faster than his rise to stardom. Saturno Chera was 42 years old when he joined the posse of bounty hunters trying to collect the reward on Tuco. A reliable face in the Almeria film industry, Serra was part of the invisible army of Spanish actors who populated these co-productions. His salary was the standard union minimum, likely a flat fee of $1,000 for the production. Unlike the leads who became legends, Serra remained a worker bee, moving from westerns to comedies as the industry shifted. His tragedy is the tragedy of the middle-class actor. He worked constantly, but never achieved the breakout role that would secure his financial future. He watched as the genre he helped build crumbled in the late 70s, leaving him and his colleagues to scramble for television work. He died on December 5, 2015, at the age of 91. He passed away in relative obscurity, leaving behind a modest estate and a filmography where he is often listed simply as henchman or gunman, a nameless soldier in the war for entertainment. Fun fact: he was also a talented voice actor in Spain, often dubbing foreign cartoons, which provided him a steady income when the physical roles in westerns dried up. The Hunters worked in a pack, and completing this group was a blonde-haired actor who often played the heavy but whose career ended in silence. Sergio Mendizábal joined the film 1968 as the blonde bounty hunter, the imposing figure whose fair features made him a standout villain in a land of dark grit. Sergio Mendizábal was 46 years old when he played the blonde bounty hunter who attempts to ambush the heroes. With his tall stature and lighter hair, he was frequently cast as corrupt officials or Northern European villains in Spanish productions. His pay for the good, the bad, and the ugly was a standard supporting fee estimated at $500. Mendizábal was a journeyman actor who understood his place in the food chain. He was there to look menacing and then die. He never saw the wealth of Hollywood. He lived on the modest earnings of the European film circuit. As he aged, the roles became fewer and further between, and he slowly faded from the industry he loved. He died in 2005 at the age of 84. His death went largely unreported by the major film press, a quiet end for a man who had shared the screen with Clint Eastwood. He left behind a net worth of under $300, the savings of a man who spent his life playing the bad guy so the good guys could shine. Fun fact: in the credits of many of his films, his name was anglicized to Sergio Mendes or even Rex Migo to make the production seem less Spanish to international buyers. The bounty hunters operated outside the law, but chasing Tuco required a man with a badge, played by a Hungarian exile who found a new home in the lawless West. John Bartha joined the film 1966 as the sheriff, the exhausted lawman whose pursuit of Tuco was a metaphor for his own tireless, unrewarded career. John Bartha was 51 years old when he played the sheriff tasked with hanging Tuco. Born János Bartha in Hungary, he was an actor who found steady work in Italy and Spain playing authority figures. His salary for the film was a recurring guest rate accumulating roughly $2,000 for his scenes. Bartha's life was defined by displacement. Like many Eastern European actors of the time, he moved west to find work, often landing roles because of his stern foreign look. Despite appearing in countless spaghetti westerns, usually as a sheriff or a general, he was never embraced as a star. He was a utility player, always dubbed, always supporting. He passed away on March 7, 1991, at the age of 76. He died in Rome, leaving behind a modest legacy and estate. His tragedy was one of identity. He was a man who played the ultimate American authority figure, the sheriff. Yet he died thousands of miles away from the frontier, a European pretending to be a cowboy to pay the bills. Fun fact: because of his thick Hungarian accent, he was dubbed in almost every single movie he appeared in, including the Italian versions of his films, meaning audiences almost never heard his real voice. The sheriff chased the bandit, but the innocent bystander caught in the middle was a terrified hotel owner played by an actor who outlived the entire cast to tell the tale. Jesus Guzman joined the film 1966 as Pardo the hotel owner, the trembling innkeeper whose comedic terror provided a brief respite from the violence played by a man who survived nearly a century. Jesus Guzman was 40 years old when he played Pardo, the hotel owner who is bullied by the protagonists. His role was small but memorable, earning him a daily rate that likely totaled $500. While his character was weak, Guzman was a survivor of immense strength. He appeared in over 150 films and television shows, becoming one of the most beloved faces in Spanish cinema history. His tragedy was the burden of time. He lived long enough to see the world he built disappear. He watched every single one of his friends from the set of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly die, leaving him as the sole keeper of their memories. He worked well into his 90s, refusing to retire. He finally passed away very recently on October 16, 2023 at the incredible age of 97. He was one of the last living links to the golden age of the spaghetti western, leaving behind a legacy of laughter and longevity that outshined the meager paychecks of his youth. Fun fact: he became a national treasure in Spain for playing the postman Braulio in the TV series Crónicas de un Pueblo, a role so popular that people on the street would try to hand him their mail for decades afterward. The hotel owner survived the bandits, but in the past, Tuco had been tormented by a baker, played by an actor whose boisterous voice masked a career spent in the shadows of the greats. Livio Lorenzon joined the film 1966 as the baker, the boisterous man whose torment by Tuco revealed the ruthless cruelty of the film's anti-hero. Livio Lorenzon was 43 years old when he played the baker, bringing his distinctively raspy voice and shaved head to the screen. A staple of Italian cinema, Lorenzon was often cast as the heavy or the villain due to his harsh features. His compensation for this role was a standard fee for a mid-tier Italian character actor, approximately $2,000 for his time on set. While this was a decent wage for a week's work in 1966, Rome, it paled in comparison to the millions the film would gross worldwide. Lorenzon never saw a residual check. He was paid to be a prop in Tuco's story. The tragedy of Livio Lorenzon was his brevity. He was a man who lived fast and died young. Just 5 years after The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly release tragedy struck. He died on December 23, 1971, at the painfully young age of 48. The cause was cirrhosis of the liver, a grim testament to the hard-living lifestyle often demanded of actors in the Italian film industry of that era. He left behind a modest estate of under $200,000, his potential cut short before he could transition into the revered elder statesman roles that his peers eventually enjoyed. Fun fact: his gravelly voice was so unique and powerful that he was frequently hired just to do voiceover work for other actors, playing tough guys and monsters without ever appearing on screen. The baker suffered at the hands of Tuco, but in the town of Socorro, a saloon keeper watched the events unfold, played by a man whose imposing size hid the soul of a frustrated artist. Ricardo Palacios joined the film 1966 as the barista of Socorro, the heavy-set barkeep who represented the atmosphere of the lawless West. Ricardo Palacios was just 26 years old when he played the saloon keeper, though his heavy build made him appear much older. He was a staple of the genre, his size making him the perfect imposing extra. His salary for the film was strictly scale, approximately $1,200 for the week of shooting. However, Palacios was not just a brute for hire. He was an intellectual trapped in a character actor's body. He spent his life trying to be taken seriously as a director and writer, struggling against a system that only wanted him to play bartenders and bandits. He eventually managed to direct a few films, but they were low budget and largely ignored, a source of lifelong frustration. His physical health was his ultimate tragedy. His weight, which got him hired, eventually caused severe cardiovascular issues. He died on February 11, 2015 in Madrid at the age of 74. He passed away from heart failure, leaving behind a modest estate of roughly $600. An artist who spent his life serving drinks to fake cowboys while dreaming of making his own art. Fun fact: he directed the 1982 film Buitres sobre la Ciudad, trying to revive the Western genre long after it had died, proving his undying love for the cowboys that gave him a career. It's bittersweet looking back at the cast of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Though time has passed and some stars have left us, their legacy remains timeless on screen. Which story shocked or touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to help us keep these memories alive. Thanks for watching. With a haunting whistle and a deadly scowl for a few dollars, More 1965 cemented the spaghetti western as a global phenomenon. It brought us the coolest bounty hunters in cinema history, figures of unshakable power who defined masculinity for decades, yet the rugged invincibility we saw on screen was nothing but a mirage. Once the dust settled on the prairie, the cast faced a reality far harsher than the Wild West, ravaged by poverty, eaten away by aggressive cancers, and lost to tragic accidents. Today, we open the file on the deceased stars of this legendary sequel, uncovering the painful price they paid for their immortality. Lee Van Cleef joined the film 1965 as Colin Douglas Mortimer, the coolest man in the West, whose steely gaze hid a broken body and a career resurrected from the ashes. Lee Van Cleef was 40 years old when he donned the black suit, but he was already a man defeated by life. Before this role, his career was dead. A horrific car accident in 1958 had shattered his knee and cost him the tip of his finger, leaving him in chronic, agonizing pain that led to a dependency on alcohol and painkillers. When Sergio Leone found him, Van Cleef wasn't acting, he was working as a freelance house painter in Los Angeles to pay off mounting debts, believing his Hollywood dream was over. His salary for a few dollars more was a lifeline, approximately $17,000, roughly $160,000 today. While this seems modest compared to Clint Eastwood's $50,000 check for Van Cleef, it was a fortune that pulled him out of poverty. However, the price of his cool persona was steep. He spent the rest of his life battling severe heart disease and the physical toll of his stunts, hiding his limp and his suffering from the camera. He died of a heart attack on December 16, 1989, at the age of 64. He left behind a net worth of roughly $2 million, a fortune earned entirely in the second half of his life, proving that he was indeed the man who came back. Fun fact: he was so desperate for work that when Leone approached him, Van Cleef didn't ask about the script. He only asked if the production would pay his overdue phone bill so he could call his agent. Mortimer was a man of honor hunting a bounty, but his target was a madman played by a brilliant actor whose real-life hatred for the movie was only matched by his tragic political obsession. Gian Maria Volonté joined the film 1965 as El Indio, the drug-addicted villain whose on-screen madness was a reflection of a tortured political soul. Gian Maria Volonté was 32 when he played El Indio, delivering one of the most terrifying performances in Western history. In Italy, Volonté was already a respected theater actor, commanding a salary higher than the American imports, estimated at $25,000 to $30,000. Yet the irony was bitter. Volonté despised Westerns. He considered them capitalist trash and only accepted the role for the money to fund his radical left-wing theater productions. The contrast was stark. On screen, he played a greedy bandit. Off-screen, he was a communist intellectual who gave away his wealth. His life was a storm of nervous breakdowns and intense depression, fueled by a perfectionism that bordered on self-destruction. He refused to be a commercial star, rejecting Hollywood offers that could have made him millions. His end was poetic and lonely. He died of a heart attack on December 6, 1994, at age 61, while filming in Greece. He died on the cold floor of a hotel room, leaving behind a legacy of artistic integrity, but a modest estate of under $1 million, having spent his fortune on political causes rather than personal luxury. Fun fact: he did not speak a word of English during filming. He memorized his lines phonetically or spoke in Italian, requiring him to be completely dubbed in post-production, even in his native language releases. El Indio was crazy, but the hunchback in his gang was played by a man who was genuinely clinically insane, a chaotic force of nature who terrorized directors for a paycheck. Klaus Kinski joined the film 1965 as Juan Wilde, the hunchback, the eccentric psychopath whose on-screen twitching was not acting but a symptom of a life in chaos. Klaus Kinski was 39 when he played the hunchbacked gunslinger. Kinski was infamous for only working for money, demanding cash up front. For this supporting role, he likely extorted a fee of $5,000 to $8,000 cash, a significant sum for a few weeks of work in 1965. However, Kinski squandered every cent he ever earned on luxury cars, women, and outbursts of excess. He was a man diagnosed with psychopathy in the 1950s, spending time in psychiatric institutions. His life was a horror story of abusing his family and terrorizing film crews. He hated, for a few dollars more, calling Sergio Leone a moron and only showing up to set if the check cleared. Despite appearing in over 130 films and earning millions over his lifetime, he died nearly broke due to his lavish manic lifestyle. He passed away from a heart attack on November 23, 1991, at age 65, alone in his California home. His ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean, leaving behind no inheritance, only a legacy of fear and brilliance. Fun fact: he was not actually a hunchback. He created the physical deformity himself, using a painful wooden brace he wore under his coat, enduring weeks of back spasms just to make the character look more reptilian. The hunchback was dangerous, but the muscle of the gang was played by a man who didn't need to act tough. He was a real-life butcher who could crush a skull with his bare hands. Mario Brega joined the film 1965 as Nino, the brutal enforcer whose imposing size hid a heart that eventually collapsed under its own weight. Mario Brega at 42 was the ultimate heavy of Italian cinema. Before acting, he was a literal butcher in Rome, a man who worked with knives and blood daily. His salary for a few dollars more was standard for an Italian character actor, likely a weekly rate of $1,000, totaling perhaps $6,000 for the film. While he wasn't paid star wages, he was Leone's lucky charm, appearing in all $3 films. Brega's tragedy was physical. He was a man of immense appetites for food, for cigarettes, and for life. This gluttony took a toll. He suffered from severe diabetes and heart issues for decades, eating himself to death while playing the tough guy on screen. He collapsed and died of a heart attack on July 23, 1994, at the age of 71, in the same Roman neighborhood where he once sold meat. He left behind a modest estate of $500,000, a working-class fortune, for a man who became the face of Italian grit. Fun fact: he was so intimidating that during an argument on a different set, he punched a fellow actor and knocked him out cold. Sergio Leone loved this volatile energy and hired him specifically because he terrified the other extras. Nino provided the muscle, but the stunts were coordinated by a man who played a gang member on screen while secretly keeping the stars alive behind the scenes. Benito Stefanelli joined the film 1965 as Luke Huey, the invisible warrior who took the hits for the stars and died with a broken body. Benito Stefanelli was 37 and served as both a gang member Huey and the production's stunt coordinator. He was Clint Eastwood's stunt double and Sergio Leone's translator. Despite holding 3 jobs on set, his pay was a flat fee estimated at $3,000 to $5,000 total. He was the unsung hero who taught the Americans how to handle European weapons and choreographed the violent deaths. The tragedy of Stefanelli's life was the silence of his pain. In the 1960s, safety regulations were non-existent. He threw himself off roofs and horses with zero padding, accumulating injuries that plagued him with chronic arthritis and agony in his later years. He never sought fame content to be the man dying in the background. He passed away on December 18, 1999, at the age of 71. He died quietly, leaving behind a net worth of under $500, a humble sum for the man who essentially built the action style of the spaghetti western genre with his own blood and bone. Fun fact: he holds a unique and morbid record. He is the only actor to be killed on screen in all 3 films of the Dollars trilogy, usually dying by the gun of Clint Eastwood or Lee Van Cleef. The stuntman took the falls, but our next gang member was a Spanish legend who played a bandit in over 150 westerns, yet ended his life fighting to preserve the very desert where these movies were filmed. Aldo Sambrell joined the film 1965 as Cuchillo, the king of the Spanish extras who built a cinematic empire in the desert only to watch it crumble into dust. Aldo Sambrell was the definitive face of the spaghetti western bandit, appearing in over 150 films of the genre. At the time of filming For a Few Dollars More, he was a 34-year-old local Spanish actor hired for his rugged looks and ability to ride a horse. His pay was calculated on a daily basis standard for the Almeria location, shoots earning him approximately $50 per day. While the film grossed millions worldwide, Sambrell's earnings were purely subsistence level, forcing him to work constantly to make a living. However, his tragedy was not just financial, but cultural. He dedicated his life and his meager savings to buying and preserving the actual Western sets in Almeria, turning them into a tourist attraction to save the history of cinema. He suffered 3 strokes in his later years, which slowly robbed him of his physical strength, the very tool of his trade. He died on July 10, 2010 in Alicante, Spain, at the age of 79. He left behind a modest estate tied almost entirely to the crumbling movie sets he loved more than money, a guardian of a ghost town that Hollywood had long abandoned. Fun fact: before becoming an actor, he was a professional footballer who played for Monterrey in Mexico, but a singing career and eventually acting took him away from the pitch and onto a saddle. Cuchillo was a survivor, but his fellow gang member was played by a man known in the industry as the man who died 1,000 deaths, whose body was a roadmap of on-set injuries. Frank Branya joined the film 1965 as Blackie, the relentless henchman who accepted physical agony as the price for his small slice of immortality. Frank Branya was a 31-year-old former shepherd and miner who found his way into films because he was tough enough to take a punch. And for a few dollars more, he played Blackie, another disposable member of El Indio's gang. His compensation was minimal, a flat weekly fee of roughly $200, which barely covered the medical costs of his career. Branya didn't just act, he performed stunts that no sane person would accept today without safety equipment. Over a career spanning 170 films, he broke countless bones and suffered chronic pain, treating his body as a rental vehicle for the director's vision. He never achieved the fame of the stars he fought, remaining a working-class hero of the industry. The tragedy of his life was the sheer physical toll. He spent his retirement managing the agony of a lifetime of falls and crashes. He died on February 13, 2012 in Madrid at the age of 77. He left behind a legacy of grit, but a net worth of under $400, a humble sum for a man who claimed to have been killed on screen more times than any other actor in Spanish history. Fun fact: he kept a detailed diary of his on-screen deaths and claimed the final count was over 160 fatal scenes, ranging from hangings to shootings and arrows. Blackie was a rugged brawler, but the next member of the gang was a silent, menacing presence, played by an actor who spent his life trapped behind a face that directors found too perfect for villainy. Antonio Molino Rojo joined the film 1965 as Frisco, the silent threat whose career was defined by being the face of danger without a voice. Antonio Molino Rojo was 39 when he joined the production as Frisco. Like his compatriots, he was a Spanish character actor utilized for his stern, imposing facial features. His salary was strictly scale, earning perhaps $500 for the entire production, with no rights to residuals. While Clint Eastwood became a millionaire from these films, Molino Rojo remained a day laborer of the arts, hopping from one co-production to another just to maintain a middle-class existence. He appeared in all but one of Sergio Leone's westerns, yet he remained virtually anonymous to the public. His personal tragedy was the stifling box of typecasting. He was a gentleman in real life who was forever doomed to play sadistic henchmen or corrupt officials. He retired quietly when the Western genre died, fading into a private life that was completely detached from the glamour of cinema. He passed away on November 2, 2011 in Barcelona at the age of 85. He died of natural causes, leaving behind a modest estate and a filmography of over 90 roles where he rarely got to be the hero. Fun fact: despite his villainous typecasting in westerns, he actually started his career playing distinguished military officers in Spanish dramas, a stark contrast to the dirty bandits he became famous for. Frisco was menacing, but the gang also included a German actor with a skeletal, haunting visage that made him unforgettable, even if his paycheck was forgettable. Werner Aberlat joined the film 1965 as Slim, the living specter of the gang whose terrifying appearance masked a surprising talent for children's comedy. Werner Aberlat was 41 years old when he played Slim, a gang member instantly recognizable by his gaunt face and piercing eyes. As a German actor cast due to the film's international co-production funding requirements, His salary was paid by the German distributors, likely a fixed fee of around 10,000 Deutsche Marks approx. $2,500 at the time. While his unique look made him perfect for horror movies and westerns, it also limited his range, trapping him in roles that required him to be scary rather than human. He worked consistently, but never broke through to leading man status or significant wealth. The irony of his career lies in his voice. While his face terrified adults, his voice delighted children in his native Germany for decades. He passed away on August 24, 1997 in Munich at the age of 73. He died without international fanfare, leaving behind a comfortable but modest inheritance, a man who was visually iconic, yet personally unknown to the millions who watched him. Fun fact: in a jarring contrast to his scary on-screen persona, he provided the German dubbing voice for the chaotic and lovable Gonzo in The Muppet Show, showcasing a comedic range the Westerns never let him use. Slim was a terrifying figure, but the gang needed one final member to round out its numbers, played by a Greek actor who found himself lost in the American West by way of Italy. Panos Papadopoulos joined the film 1965 as Sancho Perez, the international drifter who found a home in the gang but never found fame in the world. Panos Papadopoulos was 45 years old when he played Sancho Perez. Born in Greece but working primarily in the German film industry, he was another casting choice dictated by the complex financing of European co-productions. His pay was minimal, a standard supporting fee of roughly $2,000, barely enough to cover his travel and living expenses during the shoot. He represents the true soldier of fortune, actor of the 1960s, men of undefined ethnicity who could play Mexicans, Turks, or Italians, depending on what the script demanded. His tragedy was one of displacement. He was a man without a cinematic country, drifting between genres and nations without ever establishing a lasting star identity. He continued to work in minor roles for decades, his contribution to cinema substantial in volume, but negligible in recognition. He died on February 18, 2001 in Munich at the age of 80. He suffered a fatal heart attack, leaving behind a legacy as a reliable background player who helped build the myth of the West without ever reaping its rewards. Fun fact: he was often credited as simply Panos, to make his name easier for international audiences to digest, stripping him of his full heritage for the sake of a movie poster. The gang was a collection of hardened killers, but in the desolate landscape, the heroes encounter a figure of pure eccentricity, an insane old man living by the train tracks who hates the very sound of progress. Joseph Egger joined the film 1965 as the Old Prophet, the eccentric hermit whose hatred for trains provided the film's most memorable comedic relief, masking the final days of a dying man. Joseph Egger was 76 years old when he stood in the dusty sets of Almeria, a veteran of the Austrian stage who had become Sergio Leone's favorite Lucky Charm. Despite his crucial role in establishing the unique surreal tone of the movie, Egger was paid a pittance compared to the American stars. While Clint Eastwood walked away with $50,000 in a Ferrari, Egger's compensation for his supporting role was a flat fee estimated at merely $1,500. This disparity highlights the brutal hierarchy of 1960s co-productions. The local European talent provided the soul of the film for breadcrumbs, while the imports took the cake. The tragedy of Joseph Egger is that he was literally performing on his deathbed. During filming, he was already frail and suffering from severe heart complications, yet he mustered the energy to scream and rant for the camera, hiding his physical agony behind a mask of senile comedy. He never saw the finished masterpiece that immortalized him. He died on August 29, 1966, just months after filming wrapped at the age of 77. He passed away in Gablitz, Austria, leaving behind a modest estate of under $100,000 but a legacy as the grandfather of the spaghetti western grotesque style. Fun fact: he appeared in the first two films of the Dollars trilogy as different characters, the Coffin Maker and the Prophet, but Leone liked him so much he didn't care about continuity, he just wanted Egger's face on screen. The Prophet hated the trains, but he had to rely on the station clerk to survive, a character played by a prolific Spanish actor who spent his life as the perfect sidekick but never the hero. Roberto Camardiel joined the film 1965 as the Tucumcari station clerk, the bumbling comedic partner whose prolific career hit a life of relentless low-paid grinding. Roberto Camardiel was 48 years old when he played the station clerk, bringing a theatrical warmth to the cold, violent world of the film. A staple of the Spanish theater, Camardiel was hired on a standard day-player contract for the production. His pay was calculated at the local union rate, earning him approximately $40 per day, totaling perhaps $1,000 for his contribution to a film that is now culturally priceless. While the movie became a global phenomenon, Camardiel saw zero residuals, a common injustice for European character actors of that era. He worked himself into the ground to maintain a middle-class life, appearing in over 150 films, often accepting roles that mocked his rotund physique. His private life was marked by the physical toll of this constant work. His heavy frame and the grueling heat of filming locations eventually wore down his health. He suffered from severe bone degradation and complications from fractures in his later years. He died on November 7, 1986, at the age of 68 in Zaragoza, Spain. He left behind a simple estate, valued at roughly $300,000, the savings of a man who spent decades making others shine while he stood in the shadows. Fun fact: before cinema, he was a respected theater director and actually directed several plays, proving his artistic mind was far sharper than the foolish characters he was forced to play for money. The station clerk managed the rails, but in the dark cells of the local prison, another character waited, a carpenter played by a man from an Italian acting dynasty who died in relative obscurity. Dante Maggio joined the film 1965 as the carpenter in Cell, the inmate whose brief interaction with El Indio added a layer of gritty realism to the villain's escape. Dante Maggio was 56 years old when he appeared as the carpenter. He came from the legendary Maggio family of Neapolitan actors, yet in the hierarchy of cinema, he was often relegated to the background. For his small but memorable role in For a Few Dollars More, his salary was negligible, a token fee common in Italian cinema for friends of the director, estimated at around 500,000 lira, approximately $800 at the time. While his brother Beniamino Maggio was a star of the Revue, Dante struggled to carve out his own lucrative identity, often living paycheck to paycheck in the volatile Roman film industry. His tragedy was one of unfulfilled potential. Despite his immense talent and famous surname, he never broke through to the wealth that his peers achieved. He lived a quiet, somewhat chaotic life, typical of the Roman bohemians of the era. He passed away on March 3, 1992, in Rome at the age of 83. He died of natural causes, but he died with a net worth that was virtually non-existent, leaving behind only the echo of his voice in some of Italy's greatest films. Fun fact: he was famously undisciplined on set, often improvising lines in heavy Neapolitan dialect that even the Italian directors couldn't fully understand, forcing them to dub him into standard Italian later. The carpenter was stuck in a cell, but out on the open rails, a carpetbagger was about to learn a hard lesson in manners from colleague Mortimer, played by an actor who outlived them all. Jesus Guzman joined the film 1965 as the carpetbagger on Train, the arrogant traveler whose humiliation set the tone for the hero, played by a man who survived nearly a century. Jesus Guzman was 39 years old when he played the man who insults Lee Van Cleef on the train. As a Spanish supporting actor, his role was brief, filmed in a day or two. His compensation reflects the disposable nature of extras. In the 60s, he was likely paid a flat rate of $50 for the scene. It is a cruel irony that for the price of a nice dinner, he became part of cinema history. Guzman's life was a marathon of survival. He appeared in over 150 films and television shows, witnessing the rise and fall of the spaghetti western genre, the death of Franco, and the modernization of Spain. While he never became rich, his estimated net worth never exceeded $5,000. He possessed a wealth of time. His tragedy was the burden of longevity. He watched every single one of his friends and co-stars from this film die one by one, leaving him as the last living witness to the production. He finally passed away very recently on October 16, 2023, at the incredible age of 97. He was one of the oldest working actors in history, performing well into his 90s just to feel alive. Fun fact: he became a household name in Spain, not for his movies, but for playing the lovable postman Braulio in the hit TV series Crónicas de un Pueblo, a role that finally gave him the fame he deserved in his 40s. The traveler moved on, but in the town of Tucumcari, the saloon keeper watched the violence unfold, played by a man whose imposing size hid the soul of a frustrated artist. Ricardo Palacios joined the film 1965 as the Tucumcari saloon keeper, the heavy-set barkeep who represented the atmosphere of the lawless West. Ricardo Palacios was just 25 years old when he played the saloon keeper, though his heavy build made him appear much older. He was a staple of the genre, his size making him the perfect, imposing extra. His salary for the film was strictly scale, approximately $100–200 for the week of shooting. However, Palacios was not just a brute for hire. He was an intellectual trapped in a character actor's body. He spent his life trying to be taken seriously as a director and writer, struggling against a system that only wanted him to play bartenders and bandits. He eventually managed to direct a few films, but they were low budget and largely ignored a source of lifelong frustration. His physical health was his ultimate tragedy. His weight, which got him hired, eventually caused severe cardiovascular issues. He died on February 11, 2015 in Madrid at the age of 74. He passed away from heart failure, leaving behind a modest estate of roughly $600,000, an artist who spent his life serving drinks to fake cowboys while dreaming of making his own art. Fun fact: he directed the 1982 film Buitres sobre la Ciudad, trying to revive the Western genre long after it had died, proving his undying love for the cowboys that gave him a career. The saloon was lawless, but the town technically had a sheriff, though he was played by a man who spent his life pretending to have authority he never actually possessed. Tomás Blanco joined the film 1965 as the Tucumcari sheriff, the ineffective lawman whose badge was nothing more than a prop in a world ruled by bounty hunters. Tomás Blanco was 55 years old when he donned the sheriff's star. A distinguished-looking Spanish actor with a military background, Blanco was constantly typecast as officers, officials, and sheriffs. For a few dollars more, his pay was a respectable supporting fee for a Spanish production estimated at $2,000. Despite his authoritative presence, his character is impotent against the film's anti-heroes, a reflection of his own career where he played powerful men who were actually subservient to the script's stars. Blanco's private life was disciplined and quiet, avoiding the excesses of the industry. However, he fell victim to the erasure of time. By the time he died on July 16, 1990, at the age of 79, the Spanish film industry had moved on, and he was largely forgotten by the public. He died of natural causes in Madrid, leaving behind a net worth of roughly $400,000, a soldier of cinema who followed orders until the very end. Fun fact: before becoming an actor, he was a genuine soldier in the Spanish Legion, which is why he wore a uniform with such natural ease. He wasn't acting, he was remembering. The sheriff tried to keep order, but the true law of this universe was dictated by the man behind the camera, a visionary director whose obsession with detail created a masterpiece, but whose own heart couldn't handle the pressure of his genius. Sergio Leone joined the film 1965 as the whistling bounty hunter, the visionary puppet master who provided the voice of death while his own heart slowly failed him under the weight of his genius. Sergio Leone was 36 years old when he directed For a Few Dollars More, but he also stepped behind the microphone to provide the haunting, nameless whistling that signals the approach of death in the soundtrack. While he was the director, his financial situation was precarious. He was entangled in a massive lawsuit with Akira Kurosawa over his previous film, putting his entire career on the line. For this film, he paid himself a director's fee of approximately $50,000, a significant sum, but he gambled nearly all of it back into the production values to create his vision. Leone was a man of excess, obsessed with food perfection and cinema, which ravaged his body. He famously refused heart surgery because he was too busy planning his next masterpiece. The tragedy of Leone is that his heart couldn't keep pace with his ambition. He died of a massive heart attack on April 30th for 1989 at the age of 60, while preparing a film about the siege of Leningrad that would have been his magnum opus. He left behind a net worth estimated at $10 million of fortune, built on the very genre he reinvented, yet he died before he could tell his final greatest story. Fun fact: he recorded the whistling track himself because he couldn't find a professional whistler who sounded arrogant enough to match the character of Manco. The director provided the sound of doom, but the catalyst for the entire film's bloodshed was a silent, ethereal beauty played by a woman whose real-life end was the definition of solitude. Rosemary Dexter joined the film 1965 as Mortimer's sister, the silent victim whose tragic suicide on screen foreshadowed her own lonely, heartbreaking demise in reality. Rosemary Dexter was just 21 years old when she played the pivotal role of the sister who kills herself to avoid assault. Her haunting beauty launched the entire revenge plot, yet her compensation for this non-speaking cameo was negligible, a day player rate of approximately $200. Despite her stunning looks leading to a career in Italian cinema, she never achieved the financial security or international stardom of her peers. She eventually retired from acting, fading completely into anonymity in the late 1970s. The true horror of her life was revealed in her death. She passed away in her villa in Recanati, Italy, around September 8, 2010, at the age of 66, but her body was not discovered until days later. She had been dead for some time, completely alone, with no one checking on her. She left behind a modest estate of under $500,000, but the image of the woman who inspired Colin Mortimer's lifelong quest for justice, dying in absolute isolation, is a cruel irony that no scriptwriter could invent. Fun fact: she was actually of British and Burmese descent, and her exotic look was often exploited by European directors who cast her solely for her appearance rather than her acting ability. She died on screen to protect her honor, leaving behind a grieving brother and a husband played by a rising star whose life was stolen by a biological time bomb. Peter Lee Lawrence joined the film 1965 as Mortimer's brother-in-law, the handsome groom whose fleeting moment of happiness masked a terrifying ticking clock inside his own head. Peter Lee Lawrence, born Karl Heirenbach, was only 21 years old when he played the doomed husband in the flashback sequence. At the time, he was an extra, earning roughly $30 a day. However, his piercing green eyes and blonde hair soon made him a leading man in the spaghetti western genre, where he eventually commanded salaries of $10,000 per film, a massive leap from his humble beginnings. He was dubbed the James Dean of spaghetti westerns, young, beautiful, and destined for greatness, but destiny had a cruel twist. Just as he reached the peak of his fame in 1974, he began suffering from severe headaches. It was a glioblastoma, an aggressive brain tumor. He died on April 20, 1974, at the painfully young age of 30. He left behind a wife, a young son, and a growing fortune estimated at $1 million that he never got to spend. His career was a shooting star that burned out instantly, leaving audiences wondering what kind of legend he would have become if his brain hadn't betrayed him. Fun fact: to hide his German heritage and appeal to American audiences, producers forced him to change his name to Peter Lee Lawrence, and he spent his short career answering to a name that wasn't his. The young lovers perished in the flashback, but back in the saloon, a card player watched the events unfold, played by a man who was secretly studying every camera angle to become a master of crime cinema. Fernando de Leo joined the film 1965 as the cigar-smoking card player, the silent gambler who was actually a cinematic genius, biding his time before revolutionizing Italian film. At 33, Fernando de Leo appeared briefly as a card player, a blink-and-you'll-miss-it cameo. At this stage in his life, he was a screenwriter and assistant, likely paid nothing or a token $50 for the appearance as a favor to Leone. He was not an actor. He was a student of violence. Di Leo would go on to become the master of poliziotteschi, Italian crime films, directing gritty masterpieces that influenced Quentin Tarantino. Despite his later cult success, DeLeo never became wealthy. He worked in the trenches of low-budget exploitation cinema, creating art on a shoestring. His tragedy was the slow erosion of his legacy during his lifetime. By the late 80s, his films were forgotten, and he struggled with health issues that forced him into early retirement. He died on December 1, 2003 at the age of 71. He passed away largely underappreciated by the mainstream critics who once scorned his violent movies, leaving behind a cult legacy, but a modest net worth of roughly $800,000, never seeing the massive resurgence of interest in his work that occurred just years after his death. Fun fact: Quentin Tarantino explicitly cited DeLeo as a major influence, yet DeLeo died just before he could have walked the red carpet as a rediscovered legend. The card player observed the game, but the man holding the worst hand was a major villain played by an actor whose on-screen toughness hid a depression so deep it eventually consumed him. Luigi Pistilli joined the film 1965 as Groggy, the rugged outlaw whose hardened exterior crumbled in real life under the weight of a devastating mental illness. Luigi Pistilli was 36 when he played Groggy, a key member of El Indio's gang. A respected stage actor, his salary was solid for a supporting role, estimated at $5,000 for the film. He was one of the few actors to appear in Good, Bad, and Ugly, as well cementing his face in Western lore. However, the man who played tough killers was incredibly fragile. Pistilli suffered from severe clinical depression for decades, a battle he fought in silence while projecting strength on camera. The final blow came in 1996 when a theater production he was starring in was harshly criticized by critics and eventually canceled. The humiliation broke him. On April 21, 1996, at the age of 66, just hours before he was scheduled to appear on stage for a final curtain call, he hanged himself in his Milan apartment. He left behind a suicide note apologizing for his failure, a heartbreaking end for a man who had succeeded in becoming a cinema icon. He left an estate of roughly $1 million, but no amount of money could silence the voices that told him he wasn't good enough. Fun fact: he was widely considered one of the best actors in Italy to perform the works of Bertolt Brecht, possessing an intellectual depth that made his cowboy roles seem like child's play to him. Groggy chose to end his own life, but the final member of our list met his end in a duel played by a working-class actor who fought until the very last frame. José Canalejas joined the film 1965 as Chico, the scar-faced bandit who lived and died by the sword of the cinema fading away as the genre disappeared. José Canalejas was 40 years old when he played Chico, a gang member involved in the final shootout. With his distinct scar and menacing look, he was the perfect villain. His pay was the standard Spanish union rate, roughly $1,500 for the production. Canalejas was the definition of a blue-collar actor. He appeared in virtually every spaghetti western filmed in Spain, accumulating over 100 credits. He never became a star. He was the reliable antagonist who made the heroes look good. As the western genre faded, so did his career. He transitioned to directing dubbing for films, working behind the scenes to stay employed. He died on May 1, 2015 at the age of 90 at his home in Madrid. Unlike the dramatic exits of his co-stars, his death was a quiet conclusion to a long, hard-working life. He left behind a net worth of roughly $500,000, the savings of a man who spent 50 years dying on dusty sets so that we could be entertained. Fun fact: he was the son of a famous violinist, and despite his rough appearance on screen, he was a classically trained musician who often played guitar on set to entertain the crew between takes. It's bittersweet looking back at the cast of For a Few Dollars More. Though time has passed and some stars have left us, their legacy remains timeless on screen. Which story shocked or touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to help us keep these memories alive. Thanks for watching. NCIS is more than just a procedural, it is a television institution. For over 2 decades, millions found comfort in Gibbs's rules and the tight-knit family dynamic of the Major Case Response Team. We welcome them into our living rooms, feeling as though we knew them personally. However, the show's incredible longevity has come with a terrible price. While they solved crimes effortlessly on television, the actors themselves faced death sentences they could not escape. From sudden shocking heart attacks to quiet agonizing battles with terminal illness, the history of this show is marked by profound loss. Join us as we pay a tearful tribute to the beloved NCIS stars who have tragically died, leaving a void in the squad room that no investigation can ever fill. David McCallum entered the NCIS morgue in 2003 as Dr. Donald Ducky Mallard when he was 70 years old, a beloved medical examiner whose gentle wisdom on screen concealed the scars of a father's worst nightmare. While Ducky was the soul of the show, McCallum was a veteran icon who brought immediate prestige to the procedural. Initially earning an estimated $75,000 per episode, his salary swelled to a reported $175,000 in later seasons as he became indispensable, amassing a net worth of over $10 million. Yet no amount of fame could erase the devastating shadow cast in 1989 when he found himself living a real-life autopsy of the heart. His adopted son, Jason, died from an accidental overdose at just 27, a grief McCallum carried in silence for decades. He was the last original cast member to pass away dying of natural causes on September 25, 2023, just days after his 90th birthday, leaving a void that can never be filled. Fun fact: long before he was the quirky doctor, McCallum was a global heartthrob in the 1960s who actually released 4 albums of instrumental music, one of which included the famous sample later used by Dr. Dre. Ducky was a man defined by his eccentricities, many of which he inherited from a mother who was as sharp as she was suffocating. Next is the legendary actress who brought that matriarch to life, a woman whose regal on-screen presence masked a final act filled with physical agony. Nina Foch joined the cast in 2005 as Mrs. Victoria Mallard when she was 81 years old, a fading silver screen royalty who played a mother losing her mind while she herself was losing her body. A true legend of the golden age who starred in the 10 Commandments, Foch accepted the recurring guest role for a standard guild fee estimated at $5,000 to $8,000 per week, a humble sum for a woman who once commanded the studio system. However, her value lay not in the paycheck but in her prestige, as she continued teaching the next generation of stars at USC while battling her own biological clock. Behind the dementia-ridden character she played with such heartbreaking realism, Foch was suffering from myelodysplasia, a blood disorder that slowly drained her vitality. She died on December 5, 2008 at age 84, passing away at the Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center, leaving behind an estimated estate of $3 million and a legacy of teaching giants like Julie Andrews. Fun fact: she was so respected as an acting coach that during her time on set, even the main cast of NCIS would often quietly ask her for advice on their scenes, treating her like the professor she was. Foch represented the dignified past of Dr. Mallard, but the show also introduced us to his professional past. Our next subject is a comedy titan who arrived with a smile, but whose real-life final years were marked by the crushing grief of losing his partner of 60 years. Bob Newhart walked into the lab in 2011 as Dr. Walter Magnus when he was 82 years old, a comedy institution whose rare dramatic turn hinted at a loneliness that would tragically define his own final days. As one of the most successful comedians in history, Newhart didn't need the money. His appearance was a stunt-casting coup that likely commanded a premium guest fee of over $15,000 a token amount, compared to his massive fortune of $65 million built from sitcom syndication. While he played a man feeling obsolete on screen in reality, Newhart remained a beloved icon until the very end. However, his life script took a heartbreaking turn in 2023 when he lost Jenny, his wife of 60 years, leaving him unmoored in a world he had always laughed with. He followed her just a year later, dying on July 18, 2024 at the age of 94, after a series of short illnesses unable to exist without his other half. Fun fact: before he became a comedy legend, Newhart was a certified accountant who famously hated the job, once claiming he balanced the books by simply paying the difference out of his own pocket to go home early. Newhart played a mentor figure to Ducky, but our next actor played the moral compass for the show's lead, Gibbs. He was the quintessential father figure of American television, yet his own life was a harrowing battle against the bottle and the tragic loss of a daughter. Ralph Waite arrived in Stillwater in 2008 as Jackson Gibbs when he was 80 years old, the rugged patriarch who taught Gibbs his code while carrying a real-life history of heartbreak that would have broken a lesser man. Famous as the father on The Waltons, Waite brought immense emotional weight to NCIS for a recurring guest salary estimated at $10,000 per episode, a modest figure for a man who defined fatherhood for a generation. Yet the wholesome image masked a turbulent reality. Waite struggled with severe alcoholism for years before getting sober, a demon born from the darkest tragedy imaginable. In 1964, he lost his 9-year-old daughter to leukemia, a pain he buried deep within his soul and which fueled the raw emotion in his performances. He passed away on February 13, 2014 at age 85 from natural causes, leaving an estate of approximately $2 million and a cast that wept for him as if they had lost their own father. Fun fact, Waite was not just an actor, but a politically active citizen who ran for Congress 3 times in California, proving his desire to serve went far beyond the fictional roles he inhabited. Jessica Walter brought laughter with her larger-than-life personality, but our next guest star brought a unique physical presence that challenged societal norms. He was a man of small stature, with a massive heart, whose life was cut short in a shocking tragedy that left the cast reeling. Michael Gilden entered the squad room in 2006 as Marty Pearson when he was 44 years old, a charming romantic interest for Abby Sciuto, whose bright on-screen spark concealed a darkness that would lead to a devastating and premature end. Standing at just 4 feet 3 inches, Gilden broke barriers in an industry that often relegated actors of his stature to creatures or punchlines, and his chemistry with Pauley Perrette offered a rare dignified representation of romance. For his recurring work, he likely earned the standard Screen Actors Guild guest rate of approximately $4,000 per week, a modest sum that reflected his status as a working actor rather than the unique value he brought to the narrative. Despite a net worth estimated at just $300, $1,000, Gilden was a fierce advocate for little people in Hollywood, fighting for respect in a superficial town. However, the optimism he projected masked a profound internal anguish that no one saw coming. On December 5, 2006, shortly after his appearance on the show, Gilden took his own life by hanging in his Los Angeles home. He was only 44. His suicide sent shockwaves through the NCIS cast and the community, a tragic reminder that the brightest smiles often hide the deepest pain. Fun fact: in a cruel twist of irony, Gilden had previously worked as a stockbroker before turning to acting, proving he had the intellect to navigate Wall Street, but perhaps not the armor to survive the emotional brutality of Hollywood. Gilden's physical stature set him apart, but our next guest star was a powerhouse of presence whose sudden silence revealed a secret battle against a bottle that she had been fighting for decades. Elizabeth Pena stepped into the badge in 2004 as FBI agent Lena Reyes when she was 45 years old. A trailblazing Latina actress whose commanding authority on screen served as a fortress protecting a fragile, crumbling reality. Known for her roles in La Bamba and Rush Hour, Pena brought legitimate movie star gravitas to the early seasons of NCIS. As a recognized name, she likely commanded a special guest star fee in the range of $10,000 to $15,000 per episode, a significant step up from standard players, but a far cry from the millions she helped generate for blockbusters like The Incredibles. Her career was a testament to versatility, amassing a net worth of approximately $5 million yet. Behind the confident, raspy voice lay a fatal secret she kept hidden from the public eye. On October 14, 2014, the world was stunned when Pena died abruptly at age 55. While initially reported as natural causes, the coroner later revealed the devastating truth: she had succumbed to cirrhosis of the liver due to chronic alcohol use, which triggered acute gastrointestinal bleeding. It was a harrowing, lonely end for a woman who had spent her life breaking glass ceilings only to be cut down by the one demon she couldn't arrest. Fun fact: Pena was also a talented director, becoming one of the first Latina women to join the Directors Guild of America, showcasing a vision that extended far beyond acting. Pena played a temporary ally to the team, but our next actor was cast as the very first director of NCIS, a man who lost his command on screen quickly, only to find global fame later as a political snake. Gregory Itzin assumed command in 2003 as Director Charlie when he was 55 years old, the original leader of the agency whose brief tenure was a mere prelude to a career defined by playing the men we love to hate. Before he became the iconic treacherous President Logan on 24. Itzin was a journeyman character actor grinding through procedural roles. For his short stint on NCIS, he likely earned the standard guest rate of roughly $3,500 per episode, a bargain price for an actor of his caliber who would later command 5 figures per week during his Emmy-nominated prime. His departure from NCIS paved the way for the more famous directors that followed, but Itzin continued to work tirelessly, building a respectable estate of $5 million. His tragedy was not one of scandal, but of a sudden mechanical failure of the body. On July 8, 2022, while undergoing emergency surgery for a heart condition, Itzin passed away on the operating table at the age of 74. It was a frantic, terrifying end for a man known for his calculated, icy demeanor on camera. Fun fact: Itzin was a rarity in the Star Trek universe, having played 5 different characters across 3 different series, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise, proving he was the ultimate chameleon who could disappear into any species or rank. Itzin played a civilian bureaucrat, but our next subject was the ultimate military archetype. He was a man with a voice like thunder and a heart of gold, whose fictional rank of general became so convincing that fans often forgot he was just an actor. Don S. Davis reported for duty in 2004 as the MTAC control officer when he was 62 years old, a cult icon whose imposing uniform masked a gentle artist's soul that would stop beating far too soon. Best known to the world as General Hammond from Stargate SG-1 and Major Briggs from Twin Peaks Davis, was the industry's go-to military authority. Despite his cult status, his cameo on NCIS was likely paid at standard scale, around $5,000, a humble figure for a man whose voice could command armies. His net worth of approximately $4 million was built not on blockbuster paychecks, but on the steady, reliable residuals of a man who never turned down work. However, the stress of a lifetime of work took its toll. Davis suffered from heart disease and diabetes conditions he managed quietly while maintaining a grueling convention schedule for his fans. On June 29, 2008, at the relatively young age of 65, he suffered a massive heart attack and died in his home in British Columbia. The sci-fi world mourned the loss of their general, a man who provided a sense of safety and order that vanished the moment he left the screen. Fun fact: before Hollywood called Davis was a captain in the U.S. Army stationed in Korea and held a PhD in theater, making him one of the few actors who actually earned the stripes he wore on his costume. The general commanded respect, but our next guest commanded history. He was a titan of the stage and screen who brought a century of wisdom to his role, surviving long enough to become the last witness to a golden era that has completely faded away. Hal Holbrook wandered into the narrative in 2006 as Mickey Stokes when he was 81 years old, a cinematic legend whose portrayal of an elderly escape artist mirrored his own defiance against the inescapable prison of time. As the man who famously portrayed Mark Twain for decades and starred in All the President's Men, Holbrook's appearance on NCIS was a prestige event. The studio likely paid a special guest star premium of over $20,000 for his single appearance, a token of respect for a man with a net worth of $5 million and a shelf full of Tony and Emmy awards. Yet, longevity is a double-edged sword. Holbrook's tragedy was the exquisite pain of outliving his world. He watched his beloved wife Dixie Carter die in 2010 and spent his final decade working through the grief, acting well into his 90s, because the silence of an empty house was too loud to bear. He passed away on January 23, 2021 at the age of 95, sitting alone in his Beverly Hills home, the last leaf falling from a very old tree. Fun fact: Holbrook served in World War II in Newfoundland, and throughout his 60-year career, he played the role of Mark Twain on stage over 2,000 times, a feat of endurance that no other actor in history has ever matched. Holbrook was a legend who found fame early, but our next subject was a late bloomer who didn't find his footing until his hair turned gray. He entered the NCIS universe as a link to Ziva David's past, carrying a history that spanned from the Korean War to the TV screen. Jack Axelrod arrived in DC in 2012 as Shmael Pincus when he was 82 years old, a late-blooming talent whose portrayal of Ziva David's mentor triggered a wave of nostalgia, yet his own life was a masterclass in delayed gratification that ended in inevitable silence. While most actors retire by their 80s, Axelrod was just hitting his stride, having spent the majority of his life as a licensed architect before catching the acting bug. For his poignant arc on NCIS, he likely negotiated a standard guest star rate of approximately $3,000 to $4,500 per week, a modest sum for a man who once designed buildings, yet invaluable for the emotional depth he brought to the TIVA era. He wasn't chasing millions. With a net worth estimated at $1.5 million accumulated from two distinct careers, he was chasing immortality. He worked tirelessly until the very end, defying the physical decay that claims so many of his peers. However, time is the one adversary no script can defeat. Axelrod passed away on November 28, 2023, at the age of 93 from natural causes in Los Angeles, fading away quietly, much like the old world wisdom his character represented. Fun fact: before Hollywood, Axelrod served as a corporal in the U.S. Army during the Korean War, meaning the military bearing he displayed on screen was forged in actual service, not a drama school. Axelrod lived a long, full life that spanned nearly a century, but our next guest star bore a famous name that seemingly destined him for greatness, only to be struck down in a sudden, heart-wrenching tragedy while playing with his own child. Francesco Quinn reported for duty in 2004 as Depiel Luis Romero when he was 41 years old, the son of a cinematic titan who fought to carve his own path in the shadow of a legend, only to have his heart stop in a terrifying instant of domestic horror. As the son of Anthony Quinn, Francesco carried a heavyweight legacy that often obscured his own rugged talent. While his famous last name opened doors, his paycheck for NCIS was that of a working journeyman, likely falling in the range of $5,000 for the episode, a microscopic figure compared to the multi-million-dollar empire his father built. Despite appearing in Platoon and serving as the voice of Dino in Transformers, Quinn struggled to eclipse his lineage, building a modest estate of roughly $1 million. The tragedy of his life was its brutal abruptness. On August 5, 2011, while jogging near his home in Malibu with his 10-year-old son, Quinn collapsed from a massive heart attack. He died on the street before help could arrive, passing away at the shockingly young age of 48, leaving his son to witness the fall of his hero. Fun fact: Francesco was born in Rome and was fluent in 4 languages, possessing a cosmopolitan charm that directors often ignored in favor of casting him as the gritty soldier or thug. Quinn's heart failed him on a sunny street in Malibu, but our next actor faced a colder, more violent end. He was a familiar face who made a living playing tough survivors, but found himself helpless against the crushing power of nature itself. Christopher Allport stepped into the line of fire in 2005 as captors Dan Carzon when he was 58 years old, a prolific character actor whose chilling on-screen intensity was eclipsed by a real-life disaster that reads like a survival horror script. Known to millions as Pete Campbell's father in Mad Men, Allport was a reliable industry veteran who commanded a respectable guest fee of around $6,000 to $8,000 per week. He was the definition of a blue-collar actor, accumulating a net worth of $2 million through hundreds of credits without ever becoming a household name. However, his story ended in a nightmare of ice and snow. On January 25, 2008, while skiing at the Mountain High Resort in California, a place he knew well, Allport was caught in a massive avalanche that swept out of bounds. Despite his experience, he was buried alive under tons of snow and suffocated, his body found alongside 2 others. He was 60 years old. It was a terrifying, frozen end for a man who brought so much warmth and fire to his roles. Fun fact: Allport wrote a story specifically about his life in the acting trenches titled The Back Nine, ironically focusing on the struggles of aging in Hollywood just before his life was cut short. Allport was a victim of chaotic, uncontrollable forces, but our next subject represented the cold, controlled world of bureaucracy. He was the face of the agency's upper management, a man who projected order, while a silent killer destroyed his mind from the inside out. Bruce Gray took the helm in 2004 as Assistant Director Jonathan Overmyer when he was 68 years old, the quintessential suit whose silver-haired authority made him the perfect bureaucrat, even as he fought a private war against a terminal invader. A Canadian icon known for My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Gray brought an international prestige to NCIS, earning a standard recurring rate estimated at $5,000 per episode. While his character was often an obstacle for Gibbs, Gray was a beloved figure in the theater community, amassing a net worth of $2 million over a 50-year career. The tragedy lay in the slow dismantling of his brilliant mind. Gray was diagnosed with brain cancer, a diagnosis he handled with the same stoic dignity he brought to his roles. He spent his final days in hospice care, fading away on December 13, 2017, at the age of 81. It was a cruel irony that a man known for playing characters of sharp intellect and control was taken by a disease that attacks the very seat of consciousness. Fun fact: before acting, Gray earned a master's degree in psychology, which he claimed was the secret weapon that allowed him to deconstruct and inhabit the minds of the cold authority figures he often played. Gray played the man behind the desk, but our next actor was the man in the field. He was a familiar face of 80s and 90s television who spent his career chasing bad guys only to be taken down by a relentless disease just as he reached his golden years. Eric Anderson flashed his badge in 2003 as Agent Jack Canton when he was 47 years old, a ruggedly handsome face of the procedural world whose career was a marathon of guest spots, ending in a heartbreakingly recent farewell. Anderson, best known as Felicity's father, was a staple of the NCIS universe's early days, earning the standard guild minimum of approximately $3,000 to $4,000 for his week of work. He was the ultimate, "Hey, it's that guy," actor, building a comfortable life and a net worth of $1.5 million not through stardom, but through sheer reliability. However, his narrative took a tragic turn that is still fresh in the minds of fans. After a grueling and private battle with cancer, Anderson passed away on June 1, 2024, at the age of 67. His death was a shock to the industry, silencing a voice that had been a comforting background presence for 4 decades. He died too soon to enjoy the full retirement he had earned after thousands of hours on set. Fun fact: Anderson was also a successful novelist who wrote 3 horror thriller books channeling the tension he learned on sets like Friday the 13th, the final chapter into gripping literature. Anderson played the federal agent, but our next subject was the face of local law. He was a man with a roadmap of wrinkles who played the weary sheriff to perfection, working until his dying breath because he simply didn't know how to stop. Tom Bauer patrolled the screen in 2004 as Sheriff Miller Thompson when he was 66 years old, the craggy-faced veteran whose gritty realism grounded the show, hiding the fact that he was one of the hardest-working yet underpaid actors in cinema history. Famous as the janitor in Die Hard 2, Bauer was a master of the working man role. Despite appearing in massive films, his role on NCIS likely paid the standard guest rate of roughly $400-500 a figure that belied his immense experience. He never chased the millions, retiring with a modest estate of $2 million, but he chased the work, racking up nearly 200 credits. The tragedy of Tom Bauer was simply that the machine finally stopped. He died in his sleep on May 30, 2024 at the age of 86, working almost up to the day he passed. He was the last of a dying breed of character actors who brought dust and grit to a polished industry, leaving a void of authenticity that CGI can never replicate. Fun fact: before he found acting, Bauer worked as a private investigator in Boston, meaning the suspicious probing glare he gave suspects on screen was a skill honed on the mean streets of real life. Bauer was the stoic lawman, but our next actor thrived in the shadows of the bizarre. He was a quirky character actor, known for his nervous energy and eccentric roles, whose distinct presence added a layer of unease to every scene he touched. Jack Keller sat in the interrogation chair in 2004 as Tom Wilson when he was 58 years old, a master of nervous energy whose frantic on-screen persona became a cult favorite while a silent killer in his blood waited to claim him. Best known to the world as the stuttering landlord in The Big Lebowski, Keller brought his signature quirky anxiety to NCIS, earning a standard guest star rate of approximately $4,500 for the week. It was a humble paycheck for a man whose face was instantly recognizable to millions, yet he remained a working-class actor his entire life, accumulating a modest net worth of $1.5 million through sheer volume of credits rather than star power. He was the definition of the guy who makes every scene better, but his final act was one of quiet suffering. On May 7, 2022, Keller died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center from complications of leukemia at the age of 75. He had kept his battle private working until he physically couldn't, a true trooper who refused to let the disease define his legacy. Fun fact, before finding his footing in Hollywood, Keller worked as a waiter in New York for years, famously serving and accidentally spilling drinks on the very celebrities he would later star alongside. Keller played the nervous civilian, but our next subject was built to wear the uniform. He was a man with a jaw of steel and a commanding presence whose lungs tragically failed him just as he reached the peak of his career. Robert Blanche reported for duty in 2005 as Brett Willis when he was 43 years old, a square-jawed enforcer whose imposing physical frame masked a rare suffocating condition that would eventually steal his breath away. A staple of the procedural genre and a regular on Grim Blanche, was the go-to actor for authority figures, commanding a guest fee in the range of $5,000 to $7,000 per appearance. Despite his tough exterior and a net worth estimated at $2 million, Blanche fought a desperate losing battle against hypersensitivity, pneumonitis, a rare lung disease that slowly hardened his lungs, making every breath a struggle. He passed away on January 3, 2020 at the age of 58 in Seattle, taken far too young by a condition that turned the simple act of breathing into an impossible task. It was a devastating blow to the Pacific Northwest acting community, where he was considered a mentor and a titan. Fun fact, Blanche was not just an actor, but a semi-professional kickboxer in his youth, which explained the natural intimidating physicality he brought to every confrontation on screen. Blanche was the muscle of the operation, but our next actor provided the intellect. He was a veteran of the stage who brought a sharp legal mind to the show, only to fall victim to the slow, silent erosion of chronic illness. Jerry Becker entered the fray in 2003 as William Bear when he was 52 years old, a stage veteran whose piercing intelligence on camera could not solve the puzzle of his own declining health. A respected character actor, known for his intensity in films like Man on the Moon, Becker's role in the early days of NCIS was compensated at the standard industry scale of roughly $3,500 per episode. It was a workman's wage for a man of immense talent who had trod the boards of Broadway. He built a life and a net worth of $1 million not through fame but through the relentless grind of auditions and supporting roles. However, the intensity he projected masked a fragile constitution. Becker passed away on January 3, 2020 at the age of 68 due to complications from diabetes. It was a quiet exit for a man who had spent decades shouting in courtrooms and boardrooms on screen, leaving behind a legacy of solid, reliable performances that held entire plots together. Fun fact, Becker was a devoted method actor who would often stay in character, between takes a habit that unnerved younger co-stars, but earned him the deep respect of directors who knew he would always deliver the perfect take. It's bittersweet looking back at the cast of NCIS. Though time has passed and some stars have left us, their legacy remains timeless on screen. Which story shocked or touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to help us keep these memories alive. Thanks for watching. For a generation of 80s kids, the A-Team was the ultimate definition of heroism, a show where explosions were plentiful, no one ever really got hurt, and a plan always came together. We idolized Hannibal's grin and B.A. Baracus' strength, believing this band of brothers was truly invincible. But when the director yelled, "Cut!" The invulnerability vanished. Behind the cigar smoke and the cartoonish violence lay a grim reality of self-destruction, bitter feuds, and aggressive cancers that ravaged the cast. It is heartbreaking to realize that the men who saved everyone on screen couldn't save themselves from the cruelties of life. Today, we uncover the tragic final chapters of the A-Team stars who have passed away, leaving behind a legacy stained with tears and regret. George Peppard took command of the screen in 1983 as Colonel John Hannibal Smith, a fading Hollywood golden boy who found immortality on TV only to be consumed by the bitter smoke of his own ego and addiction. At 55, Peppard was a seasoned movie star descending to television, a move considered a step down at the time, yet he demanded and received a princely sum estimated at a staggering $50,000 per episode approx. $150 today. This made him one of the highest paid actors on TV, but the money couldn't quell his seething professional resentment. Peppard was infuriated to discover that Mr. T, a rookie with limited acting range, was becoming the show's breakout star. While Peppard had the higher base salary, Mr. T's merchandising checks were eclipsing him, creating a toxic jealousy that led Peppard to refuse to speak to Mr. T on set, turning the production into a war zone. He was a man fighting on two fronts, one against the scriptwriters and another against his own demons. A recovering alcoholic who had burned bridges across Hollywood with 5 failed marriages, Peppard replaced the bottle with a 2-pack-a-day cigarette habit. This substitution proved fatal. On May 8, 1994, just days after battling breathing difficulties, the leader of the A-Team succumbed to pneumonia complicating lung cancer at age 65. He left behind a net worth of approximately $5 million, a fortune built on the very role he often despised. Fun fact: those cigars Hannibal smoked weren't just props. Peppard was a heavy smoker in real life. However, he famously refused to sign autographs for fans who were smoking, lecturing them on the dangers of the habit that would eventually kill him. While Hannibal was the brains of the outfit, the show's decline called for a new power player. Our next subject was a certified Hollywood legend brought in to save the sinking ship, but even his immense prestige and a shocking sudden diagnosis couldn't stop the inevitable end. Robert Vaughn joined the mission in 1986 as General Hunt Stockwell, a desperate injection of spy genre royalty intended to save a dying series, unaware that a sudden silent killer was waiting for him decades later. By the time Vaughn joined the A-Team for its final season at 54, he was already a television icon from The Man from UNCLE. To secure an actor of his caliber for a failing show, the studio reportedly shelled out a special guest star premium fee, likely matching or exceeding the main cast's salaries, to add gravitas to the chaotic scripts. Despite his professional success and a net worth that would grow to $10 million, Vaughn was an anomaly in Hollywood, a man of immense intellect with a PhD and a stable decades-long marriage. However, invincibility is a myth. For a man who kept himself in immaculate shape, his end came with terrifying speed. Open November 11, 2016, seemingly healthy at 83, Vaughn was diagnosed with acute leukemia. The progression was mercilessly fast. He passed away just days after the diagnosis, surrounded by family. It was a jarring, abrupt curtain call for a man who had spent a lifetime controlling the narrative, proving that sometimes there is no plan B when biology turns against you. Fun fact: Robert Vaughn was the last surviving member of the Magnificent Seven main cast. He was also a close personal friend of Robert F. Kennedy and was with him at the Ambassador Hotel the night Kennedy was assassinated. General Stockwell tried to control the team, but the team spent their lives running from one man. Next is the relentless pursuer, with a voice like gravel, whose on-screen obsession with capture masked a bizarre former life as a body double for the king of rock and roll. Lance Legault roared onto the screen in 1983 as Colonel Roderick Decker, the iconic antagonist who spent years chasing ghosts only to have his own heart give out in a lonely, quiet finale. At 48, Legault was the definitive face of authority in the 80s, appearing in the A-Team Magnum P.I. and Airwolf simultaneously. While he wasn't a main cast member, his recurring contract was lucrative, earning him an estimated $3,000 to $5,000 per weekly appearance, adjusted for inflation, a solid upper-middle-class income, plus residuals that kept flowing for decades. However, the contrast between his on-screen intensity and his career reality was stark. He was a working actor, never the star, always the foil, grinding through roles to build an estate estimated at $2 million before he was the colonel. He lived a life of physical danger, as Elvis Presley's stunt double-taking the hit so the king didn't have to. The tragedy of Legault was not scandalous, but quiet and abrupt. On September 10, 2012, at the age of 77, the man with the indestructible voice died suddenly of heart failure at his home in Los Angeles. The irony was palpable. The man who spent his career hunting fugitives across the globe was taken by the one enemy he couldn't outrun: his own aging heart. Fun fact: that deep growling voice wasn't an act. Legault did extensive voiceover work and was often hired to dub over other actors' lines in post-production because their own voices weren't tough enough. Decker wasn't the first to hunt the A-Team, nor was he the last to fall. Before him stood a colonel whose pursuit was cut short and whose real-life final years were plagued by a struggle for every single breath. William Lucking originated the hunt in 1983 as Colonel Francis Lynch, the first bulldog on the trail, whose rugged exterior hid a fragile physical decline that would slowly suffocate his final years. At 42, Lucking set the template for the military antagonist in the show's first season. At the time, he was a journeyman actor, likely earning the standard Screen Actors Guild minimum for guest stars significantly less than the main cast's lavish paychecks, despite his crucial role in establishing the series' premise. He was eventually replaced as the writers wanted a harder edge, a professional slight that Lucking took in stride, eventually finding massive fame later in life on Sons of Anarchy. But the toughness he projected on screen in both shows belied a painful reality. Lucking didn't die from a dramatic accident, he died by inches. On October 18, 2021, at age 80, he passed away from what his family described as a long course of respiratory problems. The man who played characters with iron lungs and shouting voices spent his twilight years fighting for air, leaving behind a modest but respectable net worth of $3 million and a legacy of playing the toughest guys in the room. Fun fact: William Lucking was a highly educated man with a degree in literature and poetry, a stark contrast to the rough-and-tumble bikers and military officers he was typecast as for his entire career. The military men who chased the A-Team were often seen as cartoons, but our next subject broke the mold. He was the only recurring enemy to die a hero's death on screen, a poignant foreshadowing of his own quiet departure from a life lived largely on the golf course. Jack Ging took command as General Harlan Bull Fulbright, an enemy-turned-ally whose shocking on-screen death stunned audiences, foreshadowing the silent fading of a man who once stood toe-to-toe with Clint Eastwood. At 52, Ging was brought in to escalate the threat level, playing a general far more competent than his predecessors. His compensation reflected his veteran status. While not earning star money, he commanded a respectable recurring role salary, likely in the range of $10,000 per episode in today's value. He is best remembered for the Season 4 finale, The Sound of Thunder, where he became the only major antagonist to team up with the squad, only to be killed in action, a rare moment of genuine tragedy in a show known for cartoonish violence. In reality, Ging's life was less violent, but equally final. After retiring from acting to pursue a professional golf career, creating a distinct gap in his income compared to his acting peers, he lived a quiet life away from the cameras. He passed away on September 9th, 2022 at the age of 90 from natural causes at his home in Palm Springs, leaving behind a net worth of $1.5 million. He was the last of the great A-Team chasers to leave us, marking the end of an era. Fun fact: before hunting the A-Team, Jack Ging played the store owner in the Clint Eastwood classic High Plains Drifter, but in real life, he was a Division I college football star who played for the University of Oklahoma. We've covered the hard men in uniform, but now the list takes a softer yet equally tragic turn. Next is the woman who played the only female character to ever truly capture the heart of Face, only to vanish from the world far too soon. Marta Dubois graced the screen in 1984 as Bobby Cardina, a rare flash of romance in a bullet-riddled world whose on-screen passion with face masked a career of near misses and a shockingly sudden silent death. Entering the hyper-masculine world of the A-Team at age 32, Dubois played one of the few women who could keep up with the squad. While George Peppard was pulling in 50 Saigur an episode, Dubois as a guest star likely commanded the standard Screen Actors Guild guest rate of approximately $3,500 to $5,000 for her week of work. It was a respectable paycheck, yet a pittance compared to the millions generated by the franchise she briefly illuminated. Dubois was a working actress who constantly hovered on the brink of superstardom, having starred in Tales of the Gold Monkey, but never quite crossed into the A-list sanctuary that ensured financial immortality. She continued to work steadily, building a modest net worth estimated at $1.5 million, quietly proving her range in shows like Magnum P.I. and Matlock. However, her story ends not with a long battle, but with a terrifying abruptness that reminds us of life's fragility. On May 8, 2018, without warning, she suffered a massive brain aneurysm. She passed away at the age of 65, far too young, leaving her family and fans stunned by how quickly a vibrant light could be extinguished. Fun fact: despite her frequent casting as a Latina firebrand, Dubois was actually born in Panama and was the granddaughter of a Chinese immigrant, giving her a unique heritage that Hollywood often oversimplified. The show needed beauty, but it thrived on brawn. Our next subject was the ultimate Hollywood tough guy, a man who could crush a skull with one hand but write a sonnet with the other, yet remain trapped by his own muscles until the very end. William Smith smashed his way into the series in 1983 as Jace Totaro, the definitive Hollywood heavy whose fists became legendary but whose brilliant mind was forever trapped inside the cage of his own menacing physique. By the time Smith appeared on the A-Team to brawl with Mr. T, he was 50 and already a B-movie deity. With over 200 credits to his name, Smith was the hardest-working villain in the business. While he never commanded the six-figure salaries of the lead actors, his sheer volume of work jumping from set to set with a guest fee of around $5,000 to $7,000 per appearance allowed him to amass a net worth of approximately $5 million. Yet there was a profound tragedy in his typecasting. Smith was a genius in a gladiator's body. He was fluent in 5 languages, a published poet, and held a master's degree, yet Hollywood only wanted him to grunt and throw punches. He spent a lifetime dumbing himself down to pay the bills a silent artistic suffocation that few recognized. He survived the brutal stunt work of the 70s and 80s, only to fade away in the quiet halls of the motion picture and television country house. He died on July 5, 2021 at the age of 88, finally resting the body that had been battered for our entertainment for over 6 decades. Fun fact: William Smith was a legitimate physical powerhouse who was the last finalist cut for the role of Conan the Barbarian. He lost the role to Arnold Schwarzenegger only because he was slightly shorter despite having better acting chops. Smith was a master of physical intimidation, but our next actor faced a terror that muscles couldn't fight. He was a beloved TV veteran whose world slowly faded into absolute darkness, forcing him to act through a veil of permanent night. Donna Elcar appeared in 1984 as Judge Leonard Mordente, a calm figure of authority amidst the chaos who would soon face a cruel biological sentence that stripped him of the one tool an actor needs most: his sight. At 57, Elcar was the consummate professional character actor known to millions later as Pete Thornton on MacGyver. When he guest starred on the A-Team, he was earning a standard guest star salary in the $4,000 range, a humble figure compared to the $15,000 plus per episode he would eventually command as a series regular on MacGyver. However, no amount of money could buy back his vision. In a devastating twist of fate, Elcar was diagnosed with severe glaucoma that progressed to near-total blindness. Rather than retiring, he fought to keep working, forcing writers to incorporate his blindness into his characters. A public battle played out in real time before millions of pitying eyes. It was a humiliating and terrifying ordeal for a man of such pride. He passed away on June 6, 2005 at the age of 77 from complications of pneumonia, leaving behind a net worth of $3 million and a legacy of immense courage in the face of encroaching darkness. Fun fact, in the pilot episode of The A-Team, Elcar actually played a different character named George Olsen, making him one of the few actors to play two completely distinct roles within the same series universe. Elcar lost his sight, but our next actor lost control of his own body. He was a master of playing paranoid, high-strung authority figures, but his final years were marked by a shaking sickness that stole his dignity long before it took his life. Edward Winter stepped into the frame in 1983 as Johnny Royce, a master of nervous energy and bureaucratic villainy whose iconic on-screen paranoia would eventually be mirrored by a devastating neurological collapse. At 46, best known to the world as the erratic Colonel Flagg from MASH, Winter brought a prestige factor to the A-Team. As a recognizable special guest star, he likely negotiated a fee above the standard scale, estimated at $7,500 for his appearance, capitalizing on his sitcom fame. Despite his ability to steal every scene with his manic energy, Winter's career was a constant struggle to break free from the shadow of Colonel Flagg. He worked tirelessly to build a nest egg, leaving an estimated estate of $2 million. However, the cruel irony of his life was that an actor known for his precise, twitchy physical comedy was struck down by Parkinson's disease. The condition slowly eroded his motor functions, turning his own body into a prison. He died on March 8, 2001 at the relatively young age of 63, succumbing to complications from the disease. It was a quiet, painful exit for a man who had spent his career making the world laugh at his explosive energy. Fun fact: before he was a TV icon, Winter was a serious stage actor who received 2 Tony Award nominations, a testament to the dramatic talent that lay beneath his comedic typecasting. Winter played the government spook, but our next guest was the face of the Old West. He held a record for villainy that spanned decades, but behind the terrifying eyes of a killer lay a man who was simply too good at being bad. Morgan Woodward rode into the show in 1983 as Captain Winnetka, the man with the dead eyes who defined the Western villain, bringing a lifetime of cinematic menace to a modern action show. At 58, Woodward was Hollywood royalty when it came to playing the heavy. Holding the record for the most guest appearances on Gunsmoke in Dallas, he didn't need the A-Team for the money, though the $5,000 weekly check was a welcome addition to his substantial residuals. His net worth, estimated at $4 million at the time of his death, was built on hundreds of hours of terrorizing heroes. The tragedy of Woodward wasn't a sudden death, but a lifetime of isolation caused by his craft. He was so convincing as the man with no soul, most famously in Cool Hand Luke, that people were genuinely afraid to approach him in public. He lived a long life, passing away on February 27, 2019 at the age of 93, but he carried the weight of being the world's boogeyman, a gentle soul, forever masked by the terrifying characters he played to perfection. Fun fact: Woodward famously never removed his reflective sunglasses during his role as the man with no eyes in Cool Hand Luke, a choice that made him an icon but also meant he acted the entire film virtually blind. Woodward was a fictional tough guy, but our next subject was the real deal. He wasn't just an actor, he was a bodyguard for the king of rock and roll, and his life was defined by the secrets he kept and the friend he couldn't save. Red West stepped into the crossfire in 1983 as Latin Trask, a rugged enforcer whose on-screen toughness was merely a shadow of the real-life violence he witnessed as the gatekeeper for the king of rock and roll at 47. Before he was chasing the A-Team, West was a charter member of the Memphis Mafia, serving as Elvis Presley's closest friend and bodyguard for 2 decades. While his role in the A-Team likely earned him a standard guest star fee of approximately $3,500 to $5,000 per week, this was a humble paycheck compared to the lavish, destructive world of private jets and Cadillacs he had left behind. The financial contrast was sharp, but the emotional toll was heavier. West lived with a haunting guilt. He had been fired by Elvis's father in 1976 and subsequently wrote a tell-all book, Elvis: What Happened, in a desperate failed attempt to shock his friend into sobriety. Instead, Elvis died 2 weeks after the book's publication. West spent the rest of his career acting in hit shows like Black Sheep Squadron, amassing a net worth of roughly $4 million, but he could never outrun the ghost of Graceland. He was a talented songwriter and tough guy who carried a broken heart for 40 years. He passed away on July 18, 2017 at the age of 81 from an aortic aneurysm, finally reuniting with the friend he tried so desperately to save. Fun fact: Red West wasn't just muscle. He was a sensitive artist who co-wrote several songs for Elvis, including the holiday classic Blue Christmas and the emotional ballad Separate Ways. Red West protected a king, but our next guest star protected a plumber. He was a versatile character actor who found global fame in a green hat, only to have his legacy flattened into a two-dimensional video game sidekick. Danny Wells appeared in 1983 as Artie Simmons, a man who directed fiction on screen, but whose own reality became defined by a mustache, a green shirt, and a catchy theme song that overshadowed his entire dramatic career. At 42, while he played a serious film director in the A-Team, Wells is immortalized as Luigi from the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. For his guest spot on the A-Team, he likely earned a modest $3,000, a standard rate for a working actor in the 80s. Even at the height of his Mario fame, the pay was surprisingly low for a children's show host, leaving him with an estimated net worth of just $1 million at the time of his death. The tragedy of Danny Wells was the silence that followed the noise. After the Mario phenomenon faded, roles dried up, and he struggled to break free from the caricature of the Italian plumber. He worked sporadically in voiceovers and minor roles, watching as the video game franchise made billions, while he remained a footnote in pop culture history. He passed away on November 28, 2013, at the age of 72 in Toronto. The cause was complications from cancer, a battle fought quietly and away from the spotlight, leaving a generation of 90s kids mourning the loss of their childhood player, too. Fun fact: Danny Wells was the cousin of legendary actor Rip Torn, proving that eccentric high-energy performance ran deep in his family's DNA. Wells was a hero to children, but our next actor made a career out of repulsing adults. He was the master of the sweaty villain archetype, a man who turned his unconventional looks into a lucrative career until the industry simply stopped calling. John Quaid bullied his way onto the screen in 1983 as Garber, the quintessential comic heavy whose distinctively rough features made him the perfect punching bag for Hollywood's greatest heroes. At 45, Quaid built a career on being the ugly guy in films with Clint Eastwood, and for his recurring harassment of the A-Team, he likely commanded a premium guest fee of around $5,000 to $6,000 per week. Yet despite appearing in massive blockbusters, he was never paid like a star, retiring with a net worth estimated at $2 million. The contrast in his life was profound. On screen, he was often portrayed as dim-witted or sleazy, but in reality, he was an aerospace engineer before turning to acting a brilliant mind, hiding behind a thug persona. He eventually became disillusioned with the industry that only saw him as a visual gag, becoming an outspoken anti-government activist in his later years. He died on August 9, 2009, at the age of 71, passing away in his sleep at his home in California. It was a peaceful end for a man who spent his professional life getting punched, kicked, and thrown through windows for our amusement. Fun fact: before his acting career took off, John Quaid actually worked on the space program, helping to build parts for the missiles and spacecraft that defined the space race. Quaid used his face to make us laugh, but our next villain used his face to make us scream. He was a horror icon whose terrifying grin became one of the most memorable visual effects of the 1990s, yet his death went almost unnoticed. Sergio Calderón menaced the team in 1983 as El Cajon, a Mexican bandit king whose flashing eyes and devilish smile made him one of the most visually striking antagonists in the show's history at 38. For decades, Calderón was Hollywood's go-to foreign villain, a typecasting that limited his salary ceiling despite his immense talent. For his A-Team role, he likely received the standard guest scale of $3,500, a fraction of what white actors in similar roles might command. He worked tirelessly for over 50 years, most famously as the head on a stick in Men in Black, yet his estimated net worth remained a modest $500,000 and $1,000 to $1 million. His tragedy was one of unfulfilled potential. He was a classically trained actor, often reduced to stereotypes. He died recently on May 31, 2023, just days before his 78th birthday, succumbing to pneumonia. His death was a shock to fans who had just seen him vibrant and smiling in interviews. He left behind a legacy of iconic villainy, proving that you don't need a lot of screen time to haunt an audience's memory forever. Fun fact: Calderon loved to tell the story of how he got the role in Pirates of the Caribbean. Rock star Keith Richards personally chose him to play Captain Villanueva because he admired his perfectly villainous face. Calderon was scary, but our next subject was deeply unsettling. With a skeletal frame and hollow eyes, he played the creep better than anyone in history, but behind the nightmare visage lived a gentle painting soul. Anthony James slithered into the narrative in 1984 as Connors, the embodiment of sleaze and menace, whose towering height and gaunt face created a character that felt like a walking corpse. At 42, James was so effective at playing psychopathic killers and perverts that audiences genuinely feared him. He earned a steady living as a premium character actor with guest fees in the $4,000 range, accumulating a net worth of $1.5 million. However, the man behind the monster was a tragic contradiction. James was a sensitive poet and an abstract expressionist painter who hated the violence he was paid to enact. He retired early in the mid-90s, disgusted by the industry's obsession with brutality, choosing to live a life of silence and art. The tragedy lies in how the world refused to see his beauty, only his horror. He died on May 26, 2020 at the age of 77 from cancer, passing away as quietly as his characters were loud. He was a gentle flower who was forced to wear the mask of a weed for his entire professional life. Fun fact: in his retirement, his artwork became quite successful, with his paintings being exhibited in galleries in New York and Boston, a far cry from the dusty villain roles he played on TV. James retired to escape the violence, but our next actor was literally encased in it. He spent his career hidden inside heavy rubber suits and enduring brutal stunts, sacrificing his body to become a comic book legend. Dick Durock crashed through walls in 1983 as Lennox, a stuntman turned actor whose rugged jawline was usually the only part of him not covered in latex or bruises. At 46, Durock is best known to the world as the man inside the suit of Swamp Thing, a role that brought him cult fame but immense physical suffering. As a stunt performer and actor on the A-Team, his pay was a complex mix of acting fees, $3,000, and dangerous stunt bumps, earning him a hard-fought living. The disparity was brutal. He was the star of 2 Swamp Thing movies and a TV series, yet he was paid a fraction of what the voice actors or human leads made, leaving him with an estimated net worth of $2 million. The tragedy of Durock was physical. The Swamp Thing suit weighed over 80 pounds, and he spent hours baking in the heat, breathing in glue fumes and losing massive amounts of body water, which likely contributed to his long-term health decline. He died on September 17, 2009 at age 72 after a long, painful battle with pancreatic cancer, a warrior who finally laid down his armor. Fun fact: Durock was so tough that during his stuntman days, he once broke his back on set, took a few weeks off, and returned to throwing himself off buildings because he needed the paycheck. It's bittersweet looking back at the cast of the A-Team. Though time has passed and some stars have left us, their legacy remains timeless on screen. Which story shocked or touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to help us keep these memories alive. Thanks for watching. The Godfather stands as the crowning jewel of cinema, a masterpiece that redefined storytelling and etched the Corleone family into the bedrock of history. It taught us about power, loyalty, and the heavy price of business. Yet the shadows cast by this cinematic giant hid a much darker reality for its legendary ensemble. Behind the tuxedos and the power plays were lives riddled with personal tragedies, financial ruin, and devastating diseases. It seems the curse of the Corleones bled into the real world, claiming the lives of its brightest stars in ways that broke our hearts. This is the tragic final chapter of the actors who made The Godfather immortal, but paid a heavy price in life, dying leaving us with only their legendary performances and a deep sense of loss. Marlon Brando accepted the offer in 1972 as Don Vito Corleone when he was 48 years old, a fallen titan who resurrected his career to play the Godfather, only to watch his own real-life family dynasty crumble into murder, suicide, and madness. At the time of casting, Brando was considered box office poison, forcing him to accept a humiliatingly low upfront fee of just $50,000 to secure the role, a shocking pittance for a former Oscar winner. However, his genius lay in negotiating a back-end percentage that eventually netted him over $2 million as the film shattered records of fortune he would frantically burn through in later years. Behind the stoic mask of the Don Brando's life was a Shakespearean tragedy of neglect and chaos. He watched his son Christian go to prison for murder and his daughter Cheyenne hang herself in Tahiti calamities that drove him into a spiral of gluttony and reclusive eccentricity. He died on July 1, 2004, at age 80 from pulmonary fibrosis, leaving an estate valued at nearly $21 million, but he died a broken man haunted by the realization that while he could control the underworld on screen, he was utterly powerless to save his own children from the demons he helped create. Fun fact, Brando wanted the Don to look like a bulldog, so during the audition, he stuffed cotton balls into his cheeks. For the actual filming, a dentist created a custom mouthpiece to maintain that iconic drooping jawline. Brando was the father who couldn't save his family, but his on-screen eldest son was played by a man whose explosive temper was matched only by the crushing grief that nearly destroyed his career. Next is the hothead who famously paid a physical price for his role. James Caan exploded onto the screen in 1972 as Sonny Corleone when he was 32 years old. The volatile heir whose brutal on-screen assassination became cinema legend, masking a real-life period of darkness where he vanished into the abyss of addiction. Caan was paid a mere $35,000 for his work in The Godfather, a staggering contrast to the stardom the film brought him, yet this low pay was the admission price to a career that would later command millions. However, the invincibility of Sonny Corleone did not extend to James Caan. Following the tragic death of his beloved sister from leukemia in the early 1980s, Caan spiraled into a deep depression and a devastating cocaine addiction that derailed his career for years, a period he referred to as just lost time. He lost his fortune, his home, and his reputation, forcing him to claw his way back from the bottom in his later years. He passed away on July 6, 2022 at age 82 from a heart attack and coronary artery disease, leaving behind an estate estimated at $20 million and a legacy of raw masculine vulnerability. Fun fact: for the role of Sonny, Caan wore terrified dental implants to build up his jaw and create a more animalistic, aggressive look, which actually changed the shape of his face and speech pattern during filming. Sonny was the fire of the family, but the Corleone home required a silent, stabilizing force. Our next subject was a jazz legend who took on a role of silence, hiding a personal history of traumatic loss that mirrored the stoicism she displayed on screen. Morgana King sat at the wedding table in 1972 as Mama Corleone when she was 42 years old. A celebrated songstress who played the silent matriarch while harboring the scars of a horrific accident and the grief of a widow. Though she had only a few lines in the film, King was actually a world-renowned jazz singer with a 4-octave range, creating a jarring contrast between her voiceless character and her real-life vocal power. Her salary for the film was a standard Screen Actors Guild weekly rate, likely totaling less than $10,000, a humble sum for a woman who filled concert halls. Her life was marked by a devastating car accident in the 1950s that kept her hospitalized for months and nearly ended her career, followed by the premature death of her husband, jazz trumpeter Tony Frascella, which left her a young widow. She faded into obscurity in her later years, living a reclusive life in Palm Springs until she died on March 27, 2018 at age 87 from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Her death went unreported for months, a quiet finale for a woman who was once the mother of the most powerful family in film history. Fun fact: despite playing a traditional Italian mother, King was only 10 years older than Al Pacino and James Caan, forcing the makeup department to use old-age stipple to age her convincingly. Mama Corleone held the family together, but the family business relied on the loyalty of its captains. Next is the man who uttered the movie's most famous improvised line, but whose real-life ego and stubbornness cost him a place in cinematic history. Richard S. Castellano danced at the wedding in 1972 as Peter Clemenza when he was 39 years old, the jovial enforcer who taught us to take the cannoli, but whose tragic misunderstanding of his own worth led to his erasure from the sequel and a premature death. Castellano was actually the highest-paid actor in the film, alongside Brando and Pacino, initially earning a reported $50,000 plus allowances, reflecting his status as a rising Broadway star. However, his success became his undoing. When The Godfather Part 2 was greenlit, Castellano demanded a massive salary increase and fatally dialogue approval for his character. The studio refused, simply writing Clemenza out of the script and replacing him with Frank Pentangeli. This miscalculation stalled his momentum, and he struggled with typecasting and severe health issues related to his weight. He died of a heart attack on December 10, 1988, at the shockingly young age of 55, leaving a modest estate of under $1 million. He remains a cautionary tale of how quickly Hollywood can replace you if you blink during a negotiation. Fun fact: the iconic line, "Leave the gun, take the cannoli," was not in the original script. Castellano improvised the second half based on a suggestion from his wife, creating cinema history on the fly. Clemenza was the loyal soldier, but every empire has a traitor. Our next subject played the man who betrayed the Don, but in real life, he was the victim of a relentless media joke that declared him dead 30 years before his heart actually stopped beating. Abe Vigoda walked into the trap in 1972 as Sal Tessio when he was 51 years old, a struggling stage actor who found immortality as the traitor, only to spend decades fighting a bizarre public perception that he was already a ghost. Before, The Godfather, Vigoda was a virtual unknown, earning inconsistent theater wages. For his role as Tessio, he was paid the scale rate of approximately $2,000 per week, a tiny investment for a performance that defined betrayal. However, his life became a surreal psychological battle in 1982 when People magazine mistakenly published reports of his death. For the next 34 years, Vigoda had to constantly remind the world he was alive, becoming a walking punchline on talk shows while privately enduring the loneliness of being treated like a relic. He finally passed away for real on January 26, 2016 at the age of 94 from natural causes, leaving an estate of $10 million, proving he had the last laugh. Fun fact: Vigoda landed the role of Tessio not because of an agent, but because he attended an open call without an appointment, and Francis Ford Coppola liked him specifically because he looked tired and physically exhausted. Tessio was a man of calculation, but the Corleone family also employed monsters of pure brute force. Next is the real-life wrestling giant, who was so nervous acting opposite Brando that his genuine stutter made it into the final cut. Lenny Montana crashed into the cinematic world in 1972 as Luca Brasi when he was 46 years old, a real-life wrestling giant whose terrifying on-screen presence masked a gentle, nervous soul that was paid pennies to create a legend. Before he was the Don's most feared enforcer, Montana was a professional wrestler known as the Zebra Kid, grappling for cash in smoky arenas. For his role in The Godfather, which required him to loom over the cast with silent menace, he was paid a standard daily rate that amounted to less than $1,000 for his week of work, a microscopic sum compared to the millions the film grossed. While his character was a cold-blooded killer, Montana was actually deeply insecure about his acting abilities, trembling so visibly during scenes with Marlon Brando that he flubbed his lines repeatedly. He parlayed this role into a career of playing tough guys, accumulating a modest net worth of approximately $500,000, but he remained a working-class hero rather than a wealthy star. His life ended not in a hail of bullets, but in the quiet grip of heart failure. He died on May 12, 1992, at the age of 66, sitting in the passenger seat of a car in Italy, far removed from the violent underworld he immortalized. Fun fact: the scene where Luca Brasi nervously rehearses his speech to the Don was not in the script. Coppola filmed Montana practicing because he was genuinely terrified of acting opposite Brando, and the director loved the authenticity of his fear. Luca Brasi was the muscle, but the true threat to the Corleone Empire came from a man with a mind for business and eyes cold enough to freeze hell. Next is the actor who played the drug kingpin, a rising star whose life was extinguished just as he reached the summit of his fame. Al Lettieri locked eyes with the camera in 1972 as Virgil the Turk Sollozzo when he was 44 years old, the chilling antagonist who set the entire tragedy in motion, only to be struck down by a real-life curse of premature death just as Hollywood opened its doors. Lettieri possessed a face carved out of granite and a menacing charisma that terrified audiences. Despite his pivotal role as the man who shoots Don Corleone, Lettieri was still a supporting character actor at the time, earning a salary estimated at $15,000 for the film, a fraction of what his co-stars commanded. He was on the verge of superstardom, securing major roles in The Getaway and Mr. Majestic immediately after, poised to become the villain of the decade. However, the tragedy of Al Lettieri is one of stolen time. Just 3 years after The Godfather, at the peak of his physical and professional power, he suffered a massive heart attack and died on October 18, 1975, at the shockingly young age of 47. He left behind a net worth of less than $500,000, dying before he could cash in on the massive checks that were finally coming his way. Fun fact: Lettieri was the only cast member who actually spoke fluent Italian, and he spent hours on set coaching Marlon Brando on his pronunciation, helping the mumbled lines of the Don sound authentic. Sollozzo pulled the trigger, but he needed protection from the law to do it. Our next subject played the crooked police captain, a towering figure of corruption who hated the very industry that made him famous. Sterling Hayden slammed his fist on the table in 1972 as Captain McCluskey when he was 56 years old, a reluctant Hollywood icon who played the corrupt cop with seething intensity, driven by a deep self-loathing and a desperate need to pay off crippling debts to the IRS. Hayden was a legitimate war hero and a leading man in the 1950s, but by the 70s, he was a broken man living on a barge in Paris, despised for testifying against his friends during the McCarthy-era Red Scare. He accepted the role in The Godfather solely for the money, negotiating a flat fee of roughly $25,000 to clear his back taxes, openly calling acting a humiliating way to earn a living. The anger you see in McCluskey's eyes was real. It was the rage of a man who felt he had sold his soul. Despite earning millions over his career, he spent it all on boats, alcohol, and travel, dying with a liquid net worth of barely $1 million. He passed away on May 23, 1986, at age 70 from prostate cancer, a man who conquered the seas but drowned in his own guilt. Fun fact: Hayden was an OSS agent during World War II who ran guns through enemy lines to Yugoslav partisans and even parachuted into Croatia, making him the only cast member who had actually killed men in real-life combat. McCluskey represented the dirty streets of New York, but the Corleone's reach extended to the glitz of the West Coast. Next is the man who embodied Hollywood decadence, a producer whose scream of terror became one of the most famous sounds in cinema history. John Marley woke up screaming in 1972 as Jack Woltz when he was 65 years old, the arrogant movie mogul who learned the hard way that you never say no to the family facing a gruesome wake-up call that mirrored his own failing health. Marley was a seasoned veteran of the stage and screen, winning the Volpe Cup at Venice years prior, yet for The Godfather, he was paid a standard supporting rate of approximately $10,000. He brought a sense of patrician arrogance to the role, representing the old guard of Hollywood that the new era was violently dismantling. However, while Woltz feared for his prize racehorse, Marley feared for his heart. He underwent open-heart surgery shortly after the film's release, a procedure that shadowed his final years with fragility. He died on May 22, 1984, at the age of 76, following complications from a subsequent cardiac surgery, leaving an estate estimated at $1.5 million. He remains immortalized in a bed of satin and blood, the face of Hollywood's ultimate punishment. Fun fact: in the rehearsals for the horsehead scene, the crew used a fake prop, but for the final take, Coppola secretly swapped it for a real severed horsehead obtained from a dog food factory. Marley's scream of absolute horror was completely genuine. Woltz refused to cast a fading singer, a character whose desperation for fame mirrored the man playing him. Our next subject was a crooner who didn't just play a man with mob connections. He lived in their shadow, owing his entire career to the real-life godfathers who pulled the strings. Al Martino pleaded for a part in 1972 as Johnny Fontane when he was 45 years old, a golden-voiced heartthrob whose on-screen relationship with the Don was a chilling reflection of his own servitude to the Philadelphia crime families. Martino was a chart-topping singer in the 50s, but his career was hijacked by mobsters who demanded protection money. When he refused, he was beaten and exiled to England for years. He returned to play Fontane, not for the money, accepting a minimal Screen Actors Guild scale of roughly $5,000, but because he believed the role would save his career. Ironically, he allegedly used his real-life godfather mob boss Russ Bufalino to pressure Coppola into giving him the part, blurring the lines between script and reality. Martino lived a long life of luxury, amassing a net worth of $10 million thanks to his music, but he could never escape the whisper that he was merely a puppet for powerful men. He died on October 13, 2009, at age 82 from a heart attack, the man who sang at the wedding finally taking his last bow. Fun fact: Martino had no acting experience prior to the film, and during the scene where the Don slaps him, Marlon Brando hit him so hard and unexpectedly that Martino didn't know how to react, creating the pathetic whimpering look that made the final cut. Johnny Fontane was the soft face of the business, but the Corleones were about to expand into the desert where softness gets you killed. Next is the man who built Las Vegas, a character with a visionary mind and a short temper who would receive a very literal bullet to the eye for his disrespect. Alex Rocco swaggered into the desert in 1972 as Moe Greene when he was 36 years old, a former real-life Boston thug who channeled his violent past into a legendary performance, only to find that Hollywood fame paid less than street crime. Rocco was a former associate of the infamous Winter Hill Gang who fled to LA to escape a murder charge, stumbling into acting as a survival tactic. For his iconic role as the man who slapped the Don, he was paid a mere Screen Actors Guild weekly scale, netting him approximately $500 for his time on set, a laughable sum for a character whose bullet through the eyeglasses death scene became one of cinema's most enduring images. He spent decades as a working character actor, amassing a net worth of roughly $3 million, but never achieving the A-list status his charisma promised. His voice was gravel, his presence was electric, but his body eventually betrayed him. Rocco passed away on July 18, 2015 at the age of 79, after a long, painful battle with pancreatic cancer, a quiet end for a man who had survived gang wars and Hollywood sharks. Fun fact: Rocco was never supposed to be in the movie. He badgered Francis Ford Coppola relentlessly, finally winning the role by claiming, "I'm from Boston, I know how to kill people," a claim that was terrifyingly true. Moe Greene was a loudmouth who built a city, but the man who ordered his death was a picture of elegant malice. Next is a fading film noir legend who played the ultimate puppet master, unaware that his own heart was ticking down its final beats. Richard Conte plotted the fall of the Corleones in 1972 as Don Emilio Barzini when he was 62 years old. a once-celebrated noir idol whose role as the mastermind villain was a final desperate grasp at glory before his sudden lonely demise. In the 1940s and 50s, Conte was a major studio star, but by the 70s, his career had evaporated, leaving him to accept the role of Barzini for a flat fee estimated at $15,000, a humiliating paycheck for a man who once carried entire films. He poured his remaining vitality into the character, creating a villain of sophisticated evil, hoping for a career renaissance that never came. The tragedy of Richard Conte is one of abrupt silence. Just 3 years after the film's release, he suffered a massive heart attack followed by a stroke on April 15, 1975. He died at the age of 65, leaving behind a modest estate of less than $500,000, and a legacy of playing men who thought they controlled fate only to be crushed by it. Fun fact, Conte was actually considered for the role of Don Vito Corleone before Brando was cast, and he campaigned hard for it, bitter that he was relegated to the antagonist role instead of the lead he felt he deserved. Barzini pulled the strings, but he needed allies to encircle the Corleones. Our next subject was a veteran actor who shared a deep forgotten history with Marlon Brando, starting from the very streets where they both learned to act. Rudy Bond sat at the commission table in 1972 as Don Cuneo when he was 60 years old, a working-class actor whose face was etched with the struggle of the New York stage, playing a boss while living the life of a pauper compared to the stars he sat opposite. Bond was a contemporary of Brando from the Actors Studio, having appeared with him in the original stage production of A Streetcar Named Desire, yet their paths diverged sharply. While Brando became a god, Bond remained a grinder. For his appearance as the head of the Cuneo family, he received the standard scale pay of roughly $1,000 a week, a bitter reminder of the financial gap between the Don and his rivals. He lived a life of quiet anonymity, a reliable face in the background of classic films, never accumulating significant wealth. His death was as understated as his career. He passed away PN March 29, 1982 at the age of 69 from complications of a stroke, leaving behind a legacy of endurance in an industry that celebrates only the exceptional. Fun fact, Bond wrote a memoir titled I Rode a Streetcar, named Desire, detailing the wild early days of method acting, where he witnessed the raw, unpolished genius of a young Marlon Brando before the world knew his name. Cuneo was a rival Don, but the Tattaglia family was the spark that lit the fuse. Next is a man whose nimble fingers were more dangerous than a gun, a real-life card shark who hustled his way into cinema history. Tony Giorgio sneered at the camera in 1972 as Bruno Tattaglia when he was 49 years old, a legitimate magician and grifter whose brief violent screen time belied a lifetime spent mastering the art of deception. Giorgio was not a traditional actor. He was a sleight-of-hand artist and a card manipulator who often consulted for casinos on cheating. His role in The Godfather paid him the standard day player rate a few $100s that barely covered his expenses. Yet, it immortalized his sharp, predatory face. Unlike the mobsters he played, Giorgio's life was about control and illusion, but he couldn't trick his own biology. He struggled with severe respiratory and heart issues in his later years, living humbly with a net worth estimated under $500 sous and dollars. He died on February 1, 2012, at the age of 88 from heart failure, a man who knew every trick in the book, but ultimately had to fold his hand. Fun fact, Giorgio's hands were arguably more famous than his face. He was the go-to hand double for Hollywood stars whenever a script called for expert card shuffling or magic tricks, lending his dexterity to actors who couldn't fan a deck to save their lives. Al Neri shut the door on Kay Adams, but there was another wife who suffered in the Corleone orbit. Next is the woman who played Sonny's wife, a stage veteran whose on-screen hysteria masked a real-life battle against a silent, creeping illness. Julie Gregg screamed in denial in 1972 as Sandra Corleone when she was 35 years old, a Tony-nominated actress whose portrayal of the long-suffering mob wife captured the terrifying vulnerability of women in that violent world. Gregg was a star of the stage, having earned acclaim for The Happy Time, but in the male-dominated world of The Godfather, she was a supporting player, paid the minimum guild rate of roughly $1,500 for her week of shooting. Despite her immense talent and a promising start, her film career never exploded as expected, and she spent decades as a working actress in television, building a modest estate of $1 million. Her personal narrative turned tragic in her later years as she waged a long private war against cancer. She died on November 7, 2016, at the age of 79 at her home in Van Nuys, fading away quietly while the film that made her famous continued to roar through history. Fun fact, Greg was originally a serious contender for the role of Kay Adams, but Coppola felt she possessed a more ethnic intensity that was better suited for the passionate, tragic wife of Sonny Corleone. Sandra was the weeping widow, but the wedding that started it all featured a baker who just wanted a favor. Our next guest was a master of dialects who brought a touch of sweetness to the saga, a man whose face you know even if you can't place the name. Vito Scotti bustled into the wedding reception in 1972 as Nazarene the baker when he was 54 years old, a master of 1,000 faces whose request for a favor masked the grinding reality of Hollywood's most tireless chameleon. Scotti was the definition of a working actor, a man who played everything from Mexican bandits to Japanese sailors, yet for his memorable turn as the baker asking the Don for help, he was paid a standard Screen Actors Guild day player rate, likely netting him less than $1,000 for his time on set. It was a pittance for a man whose face was instantly engaging, but Scotti never chased the millions. He chased the work, accumulating over 200 credits in a career defined by volume rather than value. He was a beloved figure who lived comfortably but modestly, leaving an estate estimated at $1.5 million built dollar by dollar through decades of supporting roles. However, the tragedy of Vito Scotti was that the man of many voices was silenced by the one thing he couldn't mimic his way out of. He passed away on June 5, 1996, at the age of 78 from lung cancer, a quiet and painful end for a man who had spent his life bringing joy and texture to the backgrounds of our favorite stories. Fun fact: Scotti was so convincing in his ethnic roles that many producers refused to believe he was actually an Italian-American from San Francisco, often hiring him to play foreign parts while rejecting him for Italian roles. It's bittersweet looking back at the cast of The Godfather. Though time has passed and some stars have left us, their legacy remains timeless on screen. Which story shocked or touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to help us keep these memories alive. Thanks for watching.